Good evening and welcome to the Council Advisory Committee of the 12th of September 2022. The meeting is being held in chambers and it's being live streamed on Facebook Live, and the most up-to-date meeting package is on the Town of Kentville website. The Town of Kentville is very pleased this evening to provide a more accessible meeting for our citizens. We have sign language interpretation, and our interpreters are Karina Burris and Nicole Vino. So welcome to you here this evening. Thank you. Before I call the meeting to order and do the roll call, I would like to take a moment of silence to remember our esteemed Queen Elizabeth II. May God bless her and may she rest in peace. So if we could all stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. Call the meeting to order and roll call. The meeting is called to order. Have all the councillors received and reviewed their meeting package? And does anybody on council have information pertaining to a matter before this council which has not been publicly circulated? As a Council Advisory Committee, CAC, we will vote as a committee to either send business forward to the council meeting for ratification, return to staff for further information or review, or defeat the recommendation. And I think as council, we all are aware of our decision-making our decision-making wheel, and that we will make balanced and respectful decisions. We are doing our meeting tonight according to Robert's rules, as we've always done in the past. So thank you for that. The council will be voting electronically on all motions except administrative, which will be a show of hands. Are there any conflict of interest issues that council should be aware of before the meeting commences? Okay. The chair notes that we have quorum. Mayor Snow is absent as detailed at the July 11th CAC meeting. The mayor is presenting at the Asset Management Conference in PEI. So we have been provided with a proposed agenda. Are there any further additions or deletions to the agenda? Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to add to the agenda a discussion on ongoing maintenance issues in town. Thank you.
So I think before, so that we can vote on the agenda as a whole, rather than adding that first, I'll then go to Councillor Zabian to see what your addition is.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have two items I'd like to add. The first one is discussion on the public statement that we released, or we were supposed to release back in July. And the second item is the investigation against Mayor Snow. If we could have discussion around that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zabian. So with respect to the public statement, I don't know that we need the solicitor to advise on that at all. And if not, then we'll just move forward and I'll put it before council. Okay. The investigation with respect to Mayor Snow, and that's the breach of the code of conduct, I assume.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. CAO Trope, did you want to speak to that?
No. At this moment in time, I guess council is looking to have a discussion. I would assume at this point we would add that as a new business item.
So under new business, and then I'll ask for discussion around this. So D would be the maintenance issues. E would be public statement. F would be investigation. Mayor Snow. And that is the breach of the code of conduct, correct?
Correct.
So that would be C, D, and
Mm-hmm.
E? Okay.
D, E, and F. Correct? Because we have A, B, C.
Do you have investment on your agenda?
Investment advisory service.
That's okay.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Discussion. Counselor Zabian, you have the floor.
Thank you. Are we just discussing each item or how, yeah,
This would be, so we're setting the agenda.
correct.
So if there is any discussion whether somebody would either want an item on or not an item on, if there's no discussion, then you would just go to.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
I guess, yeah, I'm okay then.
Counselor Maxwell.
Thank you. Just, I sent a lot of pictures to councillors during the month of August of issues around the town, and those are the issues that I would like to discuss. So just to give you a little information ahead of time.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Maxwell. Are you ready for the question, or are you ready for the question on the agenda? That we approve the agenda as amended with the 3 additions? We'll do a show of hands. All in favor? Contrary minded? Yes, okay. And we have majority. So we'll go ahead with the agenda as is. Okay. The approval of the minutes. Council Advisory Committee meeting July the 11th, 2022. The minutes of the July 11th, 2022 CAC have been distributed for approval. Were there any amendments that any of the councillors saw? Okay, bearing none, the recording secretary will annotate the minutes in red, and they will be added to the electronic meeting file as approved. Next on our agenda is a presentation from the Kentville Housing Action, but we are going to delay that for a little bit because Russ is running a little bit late. So we are going to go directly into department reports and recommendations. And then once we get through some of those reports, once Russ arrives, then we'll go into that presentation. So the directors have provided their reports for the council review and will provide an update and receive questions from council. The report will be presented and are part of the record of this meeting. Only items of new business arising from the reports will be taken for motion. CEO Troke, could you please introduce our department reports and recommendations?
Thank you very much. So tonight, we'll be starting off with Finance and Director Kroll.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's my pleasure to be here to present some items of a financial nature. You've had my report for several days, so I'm just going to go into a couple of highlights. I want to bring to the council's attention and the citizens' attention that the final tax levies were generated in late August and they've been delivered to the residential and corporate citizens. And the due date this year for the final tax levy is October the 3rd, 2022. Looking at the operating fund, the benchmark for the month of August is 41.7%. Overall revenue at this time exceeds the average, mainly due to the release of the final tax levy. On the expenditure side of the ledger, expenditures are reporting basically at the benchmark, so there's nothing really unusual to report there. The summary of outstanding taxes is Schedule C, and we're looking at the total property tax outstanding at August the 31st at $5.4 million, and this compares to last year's figures of $4.7 million. This equates to about 49% collected. The sanitary sewer area service is Schedule D. This report is for the first quarter ended June 30th, 2022. The benchmark in that case is 25%. Overall revenue is falling short of the benchmark at 22.4%. because one sewer billing occurs annually and therefore skews the percentages. On the expenditure side of the ledger, we're looking at basically being slightly under the benchmark. Fiscal Services is reporting at 95.8%, but it reflects the debt repayment schedule. All other segments, for the most part, are falling under the benchmark in that particular area of service. At June 30th, the Sanitary Sewer Area Service is reporting a current operating deficit position of $25,024. The Town of Kentville Investment Plan is Schedule G. There's a number of pages there. We're looking at a $4.5 million capital investment plan, and at the date of writing, about 7.9%, or $358,200 has been expended for capital purchases at that time. And that's my very short report from the Finance Department, but there's a lot of information in there, and hopefully you've read it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Director Kroll. Do any of council have any questions for Director Kroll? Councillor Maxwell, you have the floor.
Thank you. Director Kroll, I'm wondering where we stand right now on legal fees for the Robinson property. It's been 6 months since our last report. At that time, it was about $26,000. And I have a two-part question here. I know that this amount is not covered by our insurance, and I'm wondering where does this money come from in our budget?
Thank you for your question, and I guess I was anticipating something along those lines, so I did bring some figures with me. So regarding the legal defense for Mike's Clothing Limited to the end of August, from January, well, I should say the first legal bill that we received for this property was May 24th, 2021, so we're looking at a little bit more than a year. Anyway, we're looking at a total legal expenditure for this particular defense of $45,710.89. Where does this money come from? Yes, this has not been disclosed at this point in time to our insurance carriers, and rightfully so, it should be disclosed. I have not received, or I have not seen a notice of action or a notice of intent. We have to, if there is one that exists, we do have to send that to our insurance carriers. Where does the money come from? Right now, the money is coming from the town's general coffers for the most part. Does that answer your questions?
It certainly does. Thank you very much.
Councillor Maxwell, didn't you have a second part, or was that both parts?
She answered both parts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Director Kroll? Thank you very much, Director Kroll. And now we have you going into the temporary boring resolution for the sanitary area sewer.
Yes, thank you very much. We're looking at a temporary boring resolution for the sanitary sewer area service, and this is for capital acquisitions for the year 22-23. The Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing has forwarded this temporary boring resolution to us. It has to be authorized by council, and then it has to be forwarded to the Minister for the Municipal, I was going to say Service Nova Scotia, old things die hard. Municipal Minister Affairs and Housing for ministerial consent. Once we have those authorizations in place, I can draw down money on the temporary basis to finance the capital acquisitions for the sanitary sewer area service. So my recommendation reads that I recommend the Council Advisory Committee that it authorizes the temporary boring resolution noted below, and then forwards the resolution to the next meeting of Town Council for ratification. Following this event, the document will be sent to the Minister of the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing for provincial authorization. The TBR issue is 22/23-2, sanitary sewer McDonald subdivision, which includes renewals on McDonald Avenue, Braeside, and Henry, and the amount is $230,000.
Thank you, Director Kroll. So the motion reads that CAC recommend to Council approval of a TBR 22-23-2 in support of the sanitary sewer McDonald subdivision in the amount of $230,000 at the September 26, 2022 council meeting. Could I have somebody motion that? Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Second, Councillor Huntley. So we have a first and a seconder. Any discussion? Question? Question is that CSC recommend to Council approval of a temporary boring resolution TBR 22-23-2 in support of the sanitary sewer McDonald subdivision in the amount of $230,000 at the September 26, 2022 council meeting. Voting is pending. So voting is now opened. Oh, and I guess, so where I'm sitting in the chair, it will, no, I'd rather not do that.
I'll make a note.
For this one? Yes, please, thank you. Yep. Okay. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Next on the next on the agenda is planning and development. Director Gentleman.
Thank you. Good evening. I hope everybody had a great summer. I certainly did. It just went by too fast. For the summer months, we had 15 permits issued for a building valuation of just over $1.1 million, and this brings us to a year total of $18.1 million in development within the town of Kentville. The municipal floodline mapping project's ongoing. We just received their first invoice and their first interim report. It was very minimal at this point. So right now, they're in the middle of engaging First Nations and reviewing various background information that the various municipalities were able to provide to them. Hubo Court is moving along nicely. Discussions are underway with the second phase. And some of the open space amenities as well. So the second phase is really going to be predicated on whether or not they can get the access, an additional access off of Mee Road from the Department of Transportation. Vida Living, they are the group of people up in north end of Kentville off of Heartland Court. We've seen various plans and a lot of their design work come in, so we're working with them as well because the property crosses the boundary between the town and the county. We're working with the county with them on that as well. Luckily, our regulations are very similar in nature, so there really won't be a lot of differences in development styles or design within the whole development. Bryson rezoning, I have a draft rezoning application in from Bryson Development for the end of Acadia Drive. We have scheduled a tentative public information session for the 27th of September. The reason for that is because, though this is a simple rezoning, because of the size of it and potential discussion that might occur as a result of this rezoning, because there will be some multifamily involved with it. We're just going to have an open session to let people come in and express their their concerns. So it's a PIM, it's a public information session. Council's not required to be there, but highly encouraged to do so. So we want to have it hopefully within a week or two of hopefully being able to get an application before CAC in October. That's the time frame for that at this time. And Encore, still they keep calling and wanting to know, we're ready for permits for them and what they can do on the property up in Ryan's Park in terms of how much they can vary from what they've submitted under the site plan process 2 years ago. But through those discussions, we've assured them that what they might change is okay. We're just waiting to see what those might be. So, planning and engineering continue to work with the developer up on Chester Avenue. That keeps changing regularly as well. So we're still waiting to see something concrete come in from those folks and see something happening there. So that's my report.
Thank you. And does anybody have any questions for the director? Okay. Councillor Zabian, you have the floor.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Thanks, Director, gentlemen. Just a question, I'm pretty sure it's R1, the street off of Acadia, Mount St. Vincent, that's zoned R1, right?
It's R1.
Correct, okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Bev. I was wondering, could you tell me, who is Vidi Living? Where do they come from? Are they
Well, actually,
local?
I really don't know. We've only really met with them once.
Yes.
We're dealing more with our consulting
Okay.
person who's
Yeah.
based out of Halifax.
Oh, okay.
I think they're out of Ontario. That's my understanding.
Okay.
A few of them anyways.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Director Gentleman, I do have a question for you. And I'll preface that by saying, because of the technical aspect of running the microphone and the lights and everything, I wouldn't normally speak from the chair on a topic or ask questions. I would go into around the carousel and I would relinquish the chair, but I'm not going to do that because it's too much work. So I will ask from the chair, but I'm not asking as the chair, I'm asking as the
Sure.
deputy mayor. So with respect to the Bryson rezoning, can you sort of take us through that? So there will be a public information session on or around the 27th of September.
Right.
And then what does that look like for folks
The public
watching?
information session
Um,
or the whole process?
oh, the whole process, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, generally, just a very simple rezoning. It's basically a report that goes to CAC as a recommendation to go to council, and CAC would review the application, make a recommendation for first reading to council. Council would have first reading, a public hearing would be set, and then they would have second reading, and all the information that they get garnered through the public hearing process would be taken into consideration in the overall decision-making process for the rezoning. Because of the size of this, and I think as this council is familiar with, when we went through the plan amendment process, 2019,
That was 2019, yeah.
there was a lot of pushback from R2 development within that area. So there is going to be some R2 potential proposal within this. So I haven't got a completed application, but I know there's discussion out there. So I just wanted to say as much as I can about it. But this is really just to have that extra step that and the developer really wants to have that as well as their consultant, just to be upfront about the whole thing and provide a little more information to folks that have questions about it, rather than taking it directly to council first.
Okay, and how large is the piece of land?
It's going to be about 44 acres.
44 acres, okay. I have another question as well. On the Encore development, when you talk about some of the things that might change, that potentially was the height of the
The height.
buildings or the,
It'd
okay,
be the height, not the number or the footprint, just the height.
just the height?
Yeah,
Okay, all
and
right.
that wouldn't trigger any change in the site plan.
It wouldn't, okay, okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Maxwell?
Yeah, just question, just.
Oh, here, I'll put your mic on.
Okay. Yeah, question just hit me. How many changes now is that Encore has initiated? Since this seems to be going on for quite a while, and we haven't really made a lot of progress other than the Ryan's Park part. So, like,
Well,
how many changes?
there really hasn't been any changes. There's only been just discussions about some changes they might want to make in the future.
Yeah.
So all we have now at our disposal are the plans that were originally submitted during the site plan process. Yeah.
It's been dragging.
Well, yeah, I think that we thought that they'd be putting up their bigger
little further-
buildings later on.
little
But
further
they're
ahead.
concentrating more on the Ryan's Park side first
Right.
before they move ahead. Because I think eventually those two, there's going to be a separation in ownership
Right.
between those two developments. That's my understanding. So I think they're trying to finish up one before they move into another.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Director Gentleman. And we do have Parks and Recreation next, but I think, Director Gentleman, we're going to go back to our presentation from Laurel and Russ.
Okay, can I do a roll?
I'm sorry, yes, CAO Troke, yes. This is on the Kentville Portal Youth Outreach Association and Canadian Mental Health Association, and CAO Troke will lead into this.
Thank you very much. So as council is aware, starting a year ago this summer, a number of folks from the community were coming together as we had different housing challenges that were materializing. And it was everything from housing and homelessness, to folks at risk of losing their housing, to overall some of the general challenges with housing in the Annapolis Valley. And so those conversations, well, I guess about 14 months ago now, started us down a path of a number of groups working together and working collaboratively around different challenges. And so as we led into this summer, we had an opportunity to bring folks back together again to talk about what would be those items that if we could talk about influences. So from a municipal lens, what are those things that if we were thinking about as decision-making would be made around these carols? From a nonprofit sector, what would be the types of things that their challenges, the evolving landscape, but also from a perspective of engagement of the private sector, engagement of other levels of government as well. And so coming out of that, there's a discussion was around, let's kind of look at this overarching piece as a bit of a Kentville Housing Action Plan. And if anybody wants to borrow it and make it bigger at the end of the day, great. But it becomes a series of lenses that maybe we can use when we're trying to do our work here, but also how we as a municipal unit could be working closely with those folks on the ground trying to address some of the real tough challenges that we have. So tonight, we have Russ and Laurel here to walk us through a few slides and kind of give you a flavor of kind of where some of this thought process is going.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start, and then once we get into the slides, we're going to bounce back and forth between Laurel and myself. It is a pleasure to be here. I don't know if you realize, but any plan anywhere in Canada that has tackled homelessness and made a severe dent in the issue has been when a municipal leader or leaders take a hold of the plan and move it forward. And that's examples like Medicine Hat and Calgary. It's a fairly complex thing, and this Kentville Housing Action Plan is not addressing all of that, but it is a part of a bigger whole. And Dan's right, we intend to share this plan with other municipalities, because the dream would be is if each smaller unit across the valley took on some initiative, that would be awesome. That would be really good, and I think it's really needed. One other piece, as intro to this, I was at a council meeting or meeting of the whole, whatever they call it, for Kings County, and there was struggle around that Canning development that you've all heard about. And what was interesting was the development itself, I don't think was the issue. The issue was process, and the issue was community engagement. So I really encourage that for any municipality to have good engagement about the priorities and the process, because that's going to make a huge difference in terms of getting that buy-in. And I'm sure you all know that, but that was certainly something that I observed there. And it would have been a shame to sacrifice that development because their process wasn't so good. So let's go right into the slides. Oh, I guess that's me. These are the 5, it says 4, but there's really 5 baskets because there's a few things that didn't fit in every single one of them. And this is not anything new. This is well thought out. This is with some good input from people that know what they're talking about, and it's also based upon what else is happening in other places. Development supports prevention, advocacy, and other. Now, this doesn't mean that Kentville needs to drive the social service kind of things that are needing to happen, but it's a connection to and an awareness of. This is the one I know least about, so if I skip forward, can we come back and you address this one, Dan? Okay. So supports. I'm going to have Laurel talk about this, and then I'll jump into the next one.
Oh, okay. So I'm with Project Hope, which is, we help support people in community that are homeless. And I can tell you right now, the need is quite large in our community. So the supports we bring forward are helping people to navigate the systems right now. Is there a shelter? Is there not a shelter? If there's no shelter, where can they stay? That sort of thing. So we're working with other agencies to ensure that we have the pathways for people so they know how to make those connections. We know there's challenges for income right now. Many people that are on our caseload, it's totally economic. It's not because they need any supports. They know how to pay their rent. They don't have the money to pay the rent. So those would be people on income assistance or seniors. That is a growth area that I'm seeing, just to let you know, okay? And we have issues happening with our provincial government where we often get one-time assistance and it's not over time. So right at the moment, our housing supports in the way of a subsidy is very limited. And that's pretty much the only thing they get over each month. If it's a one-time amount of money, that is normally towards eviction prevention, so that's usually a one-time thing. We are here to help keep people housed. And sadly, because of the dire need and lack of housing right now, that's expanding to include people who really don't need to have us. So I had a meeting today with the MLA in Berwick, actually, and he put it very succinctly. We're here to really help the most marginalized, and because there's such a need, those people are becoming even more marginalized because the scope of who we're dealing with is that much larger. And also, in my world, it's much better to help keep people housed. We're now managing them in their homelessness, which is a whole other thing. So we do have emergency versus ongoing support. I'd rather do the ongoing than the emergency, but very much is happening around emergencies where people are suddenly evicted because where they're living has been sold or something like that. So we have to deal with those situations.
I think further to this information that you have in front of you about supports, all the supports in Kings County are coordinated. So we're talking about from emergency to what Laurel and her team does, to then permanently housed. All partners and all agencies are working together and at the same table, and that's very important. And Kentville actually has the benefit of that because most of those supports are housed in Kentville. And so it's pretty immediate and it's pretty direct. Prevention, it's a huge topic. Laurel addressed some of it. So when you keep people housed as opposed to having them go homeless, that's definitely one important piece. But there's also, my dream is being able to work with schools, recreation providers, other agencies, so that when you know someone's struggling, a family or an individual, you can actually get the interventions in place long before they become homeless. Are they isolated? Do they need educational supports? Do they need employment supports? All of those things help with prevention. On the youth side, it's giving them skills so that when they turn 18, 19, they actually would be employable and not either leaving home or coming out of child welfare and being unable to provide for themselves or at least get a start on things. And so that's all a part of that. What's really key that does not exist throughout the valley, and it's shocking to me, is safe places for people to go. I'm not talking about shelters. I'm talking about during the day. I'm talking about youth. I'm talking about families, places to talk, have a cup of coffee, maybe a soft way of finding out where they can gain support so they don't feel like, they've got to go in to that scary place and ask for help at DCS or at the school and making themselves known, but somewhere where over a cup of coffee or a game of pool or a game of foosball, they can say, yeah, I don't know how to do that. Or there's crap going on at home and I need help. That's the kind of thing that would go a long way in preventing the youth side, which really, if you don't intervene when they're young, then you're going to be dealing with them when they're 20 to 25 or older, when they're a struggling young family. There's whole programs dedicated to some of this, but I would say this is the least resourced area across the province. And I think if we create a few models in a few places, then we can promote those models and get them out there. And that's what I was busy doing today on my computer, and that's why I'm glad that Jim and his friends weren't on the road when I zipped down here, because you've got to really convince people out there that prevention is worthwhile and necessary to fund. And all of these parts are really important. Healthy foods, healthy connections, landlord relationships. Let's deal with the Facebook group that landlords have that blacklist people. Let's actually deal with the relationships with landlords so that we can support landlords who are struggling, who it's not always feasible for them to keep people that are struggling in their buildings because there's not enough support for them. And so that's all stuff that we could do under prevention. I'm going to say one piece, and then Laurel, if you have anything, you're going to jump right in. I think that when we have a number of municipalities that have these, I'm going to call them mini plans, because to you it might feel like a big plan, but to me it feels like a part of a whole. But the more advocacy that goes forward to Nova Scotia Housing, municipal affairs, local MLAs, all of that, that's really important. In fact, we've been working for over a year to get access to a piece of land in New Minas, and it's exhausting. And so if there is an advocacy for those processes to be quickened, and this is us knowing who to talk to and what to ask for. And it's still over a year waiting to actually get a release for land that I think everybody wants to have for development for housing, and yet it takes more than a year to actually get the go-ahead to write the proposals and work on stuff. So we need advocacy for housing, we need greater advocacy for treatment. All of these things are very, very key. We did a huge marketing and promotion and education piece 2 years ago around homelessness. In fact, the first time I spoke to the council, you've come a long way, when I said there was X number of kids that were homeless and couch surfing, I got criticized at the town meeting. So already there's greater awareness, but we need to actually do even more awareness so people understand everybody can play a part to end homelessness. Everybody can play a part to deal with this housing crisis. Spare rooms, accessory dwelling suites, change your Airbnb to a rental, because then all those things could really make a difference. This October, we are going to get some data, and it's going to be very community specific, and it's going to be a count on precarious and homelessness across the valley done by Acadia, and so all of that can help with this awareness piece.
I don't think
I
have
covered
anything
it
to
all.
add to that.
Dan, you know far better about this stuff than we do.
Well, thank you, and actually, you've already touched on some of it. So, really on the development side, so this comes from, obviously, from the municipal lens more specifically, and thinking about as different pockets of land open up in Kentville. I mean, we have a significant number of parcels as the town grows will be opened up. New roads will be put in, new roadways will be put in. And so is there an opportunity for the town to be thinking about specifically any parcels of land that could be used, or organizations such as the nonprofit sector who often has difficulty accessing lands, and Russ talked about some of the complexities, that the municipality could be working with them to secure some of those pieces for different kinds of housing options. Kentville already has a bonusing option. So how would a town want to be not just promoting that, but actually as part of our development process be, encouraging folks to be thinking about that? So if you had an R3 zoning, could there be a few more could be added to that as just part of a development process, that if bonusing would give a lot of opportunity for more, not just more development, but maybe even those more affordable options. This might mean thinking a little bit outside the box on how we normally do things, but quite frankly, when you look at some of those other municipal units across the country that have been successful, it's kind of where they came from. They put some stuff on the table, they work through maybe the clunkiness of how you make it work, but then once you figure out how to make it work and that process is more streamlined, then it makes it easier for the development community. It makes it easier even for citizens who are just looking to add additional units. And so ultimately, even tonight, we've already had a few conversations around zoning. But what are some of the things that we could be doing that for those things that don't exactly fit or might be new ways to deal with things, bring them in, have a conversation around them, and see kind of how we can get more housing developed. And particularly, and I know I've mentioned this before, we kind of have this great opportunity here in the valley where there's rarely a fight over turf when it comes to trying to help people out. Folks are all saying, okay, do I have a role? Can I help? How can we make it work? And that's happening within our own municipal unit. It's happening in our cooperation with the nonprofit sector. That doesn't happen everywhere. And so the fact that everybody is saying, look, we want to figure out how we can come up with some principles, some ways that we can work together, keep this work that has already generated some positive results. How can we make sure that this is a lens that we're going to use kind of as we move forward in some of these different things?
And just those other pieces end up going along with a lot of those other parts, the housing support and the prevention. Hopefully transportation is something that we can actually make an impact on and actually see that we could put people in different places if the transportation plan was a better plan, let's just say, and more efficient. So, thank you. I guess we're certainly available for any questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Russ, and thank you, Laurel. And council, does anybody have any questions? Councillor Maxwell, you have the floor.
Thank you. And I'm glad to see Laurel there because one of these questions is for her. I think she can handle it. I know that mental health is a huge issue in homelessness. I know that. And I know that part of that problem is that some of the mental health issues won't allow those citizens to go to shelters, to go to homes, that they don't feel comfortable to do that. Is there a plan in place to handle that part of it?
Do you mean from the healthcare point of view?
Yeah, or like, we're looking at housing to help for homelessness, yet there's a sector of that group that won't take the housing that you offer them. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
So is there a plan, or is anybody looking at how do you get to that? Like, how do you solve that? Because some people that are tenting, let's say in Miners Marsh, even if you offered them somewhere else to go, they don't feel comfortable going. So I'm wondering if that is part of this, or is that?
I think it's more, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah,
I
no,
think
go ahead.
I understand what you're saying. There
Okay.
is a group that would fall into that.
Yeah,
Unless you change the laws of our land, which really everyone has the right to live as they want to live, you
Right.
can't. So you'd have to have them declared to have incompetency. But that's a whole other process, so no. But I would say in the world that I'm inhabiting right now, they're a much smaller group than the rest of the population that are becoming homeless. We just see them, or might hear more from them, but they aren't the majority of the people that we're working with right now.
okay,
Okay?
good, thank you.
Councillor York, you have the floor.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you for your presentation and your time. I know the amount of time that you put into this presentation is just the tip of the iceberg to the work that you're doing every day. I'm wondering if you've been working with, and I'm sure that you have, the AVRCE when it comes to like food security and transportation, and just those getting to know who might be falling through some of the cracks, like catching them before they hit you guys. Are you working with the schools?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, the amount of resources that have gone into schools in the last 3 years has been astounding. An increase of Schools Plus outreach workers, child and youth practitioners, and then they just hired a outreach worker for each of the high schools again. And so when kids are connected to schools, there's a protective factor. Now, are they growing in their ability to intervene and to know how they can address that from a homeless perspective? They've invited us to be a part of their Schools Plus Council or Advisory Council, and they're also part of our youth community hubs. And in fact, when we do the refresh of Homeless No More on September 26th, a key person from Schools Plus is joining us. And so I hope to tighten that. So they've come a long way. Do schools still contact the portal and ask for assistance? Yes. But what the portal's trying to do is focus on kids not in school because they don't have anybody. And so, yes, we're well aware, and yes, we're working together, and I think we could do even better than what we've done.
And as a bit of a follow-up, sorry, have you given or would you be open to giving presentations to the parent-teacher associations for various schools? Because I know when you're trying to grow community and to grow those connections, perhaps boots on the ground might be more effective than the school itself. They one step removed.
Yes, or I would address that with a team of Schools Plus outreach workers, provide them the tools so they can do those presentations.
Yeah.
But absolutely, yeah, exactly. Don't give me more work to do.
Yeah.
But certainly making sure they've got the tools to do that.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Maxwell, I have you up again.
Yep,
Yes,
yes, thank you.
go ahead, please.
This is for CAO. I don't understand this bonusing option. I've never heard of it before. And you said that it is part of our policy. So it is in the town of Kentville. I'm not aware of it. I don't understand it. And exactly where can I read up on it in our land use policy and our municipal policies or anything like that? So if you could answer those questions, that'd be great.
Sure, happy to. So first, I'll circulate it, so you won't have to look for it. I'll
Oh,
make sure that everybody has a copy of it. But yeah, we already have the ability to add bonus units based on affordability. Now, there's obviously, you want to try and define what you mean by that. So
Yeah.
therefore, it makes it a little trickier, and that's usually where most municipal units struggle with that. But there is already on our books the ability to do a bonusing feature. And then also, if you consider with the recent changes that have been made to the, we'll call them the in-law suites, the secondary suites, everybody basically has the right to add another unit on their property. So these are things that a lot of municipal units either don't already even have. So we're already much farther down the road when it comes to that ability to do additional units. I think there's going to be some work, though, around what do we want that to look like, how would we promote it, and what would we use as our kind of thresholds when we talk about affordable housing.
Okay, so we don't have it written in our guides per se yet, but we have the ability to do that. That's what you're saying.
You're right. So the ability to do bonusing is already in there. And I think it just comes down to probably pulling the trigger on one or two pilots to say, here's how we want it to work.
Okay, thank you.
I actually do have a question, if nobody else around the carousel has a question, and I don't think they do. So I attended the Kemptville Rotary meeting today, because I'm a member, and MLA John Lohr spoke as the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and he talked about what's happening specifically in HRM and how they have a joint board set up between municipal and provincial. And it was really interesting to hear about that and the dynamics of that. And one of the Rotarians asked the question if that was going to happen in the respective municipalities across the province. And he said probably not, in terms of the capacity that they're doing it now in HRM, because it's a larger area. But what he could envision is that more municipalities coming together and doing that sort of joint work between the municipality and the province. And I'm just wondering if you wanted to comment on that at all.
It's all about time and manpower, but absolutely. Is there a heart for that? I think across municipalities, yes. Because a year ago when we started calling a rep from municipalities to meet with us to deal with a pending housing crisis in the winter, there was great support for that.
That's great.
And in fact, I think on the 26th, that's an emphasis we took. It's a Homeless No More refresh, and we're about 4 or 5 years in, so we're doing a refresh. And we've made an extra effort to invite municipal units to join us.
Right.
And so I think that's a great start, and I think if we could take what Halifax is doing and do a hybrid of it, I think we'd have a bigger voice, and I think it would be foolish for us not to.
Absolutely.
It's all a matter of who's coordinating all these pieces.
Right.
And I do have a call scheduled with housing, Nova Scotia Housing, talk about community capacity and that very fact that we are lacking that piece. Key coordinators that could coordinate those kind of things.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you
Good,
very much.
Good, I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. Oh, sorry, Councillor Zabian, I see your light is on and you have the floor.
No reason to say sorry. I just want to thank you both for your presentation. And if there's anything any of us can do individually in the community, just keep us abreast. And I know we'd all love to help, so thank you.
Well, like I said, things have come a long way since the first time I stood up here and was almost chased out.
When was
No, it's
that?
a real change.
How long ago was that? Oh,
Well, let's just say the previous mayor, who was male, I even forget his name. I do, I honestly do. But I think the big difference was it was like denying a problem, hoping it would go away, or saying something about, well, people are coming in from the county to the Kentville. And I thought, who cares? You've got an issue with kids that are couch surfing. Can we deal with it? And I would say we've come a long way, and there's still a ways to go, but it's encouraging. So thank you.
thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Zabian. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
So we will move right back into reports, and Director Benningfield.
Thank you, Council. I'm just turning the screen off. So in keeping with the theme, the first part of my report that I wanted to touch on was the meeting that Russ and Laura were talking about under administration and operations within Parks and Rec. Like they mentioned, we do have a Valley Homeless No More committee that has existed for a number of years. And so on the 26th, we're getting together to kind of do the Homeless No More 2.0. So on that day, we're going to meet in Berwick with a number of people who are experts in the area and just have a conversation around we've had success in these areas, how can we move forward and expand it. Homeless No More was originally focused on youth, and now we've expanded it to all people just because it's just exponential. And so from that, we're gonna be able to gather some thoughts and information and have a meeting in December with decision makers and kind of present this is what we think we need to do in terms of moving forward in the valley, so for valley-wide pieces. Part of that, and also on my report, and again, Russ spoke to this, stealing my thunder as usual. We have a community support in partnership with Acadia University, a community support service-based count, and Russ mentioned that we need that data in order to be able to move forward. This will be our second, and it's really like a place and time count, so how many people are experiencing homelessness right now. The difference between this particular count that's coming out is that it's going to be a little bit more detailed, and we're asking things like, are you connected to a church? Are you connected to recreation? Are you connected to your community? For that very reason. So Russ talked about how prevention is really undervalued. This is hopefully going to get to that, so we have a little bit more information as to where we can best put our resources. But it's something certainly that, as a whole, all the folks that sit around the Homeless No More table talk about this often. Moving on, the research that our department did around the response to rural and low-income mothers when it comes to our response to the pandemic, that's been accepted at a number of conferences and, see you later, and different webinars. So we have on Wednesday, actually, an NSFM webinar, Reimagining Municipal Recreation Services for Rural and Low-Income Families. So that's coming up. We're also presenting in October for a 3-hour workshop to recreation practitioners across the province, and also at the end of the month, virtually, we're presenting at Arizona at a North American National Recreation and Parks Association conference. There's already been at least 5 published papers with this data. Kenfill's being published as a model of what's going on during the pandemic. There's still lots of work to do. Part of the studies, as we keep kind of mining the data, is taking a look at all of the parts that we missed. So we hit the target on a lot of things. COVID offered our department a huge opportunity to say, okay, well, we just need to do things differently right now because it's a bit of an emergency situation. And where we were lacking are things like, what does an anti-racist approach look like? How are we working with the Filipino community in the town of Kentville, the immigrant community, all of these different things. So we're continuing to work on that as a department, and with the support of our community and our organizations, and with our accessibility and action, our accessibility advisory committee. Under facilities and operations, I always have to start this time of year off by thanking our summer staff who really come in and kind of help us keep going. We wouldn't be able to do much without our summer staff. In total, between parks and programs, we hire between 25 and 30 students every summer as part of our commitment to the town, but also youth development. So we're quite excited about that. So, but it does not work without them, so we're forever grateful. And in keeping with the theme a little bit around homelessness, some of those pictures, if not all of those pictures that you saw in that presentation, were taken in Kentville. We have homelessness continually come up in our parks. We have people using our facilities for shelter. It is something that is constant, and it's top of mind, certainly on the park side of it, be it because it's costing us money, be it because we're having to act as first responders in some cases. It is a real issue that needs to be addressed, and we hear about it all the time from our community. Parks and Trails, the Kentville Ravine, there is a letter in your package that the mayor received. I received the same letter, but essentially they have been working to remediate the situation, and a meeting is planned for September. And hopefully we'll get more of an update after that. But I do continue to receive phone calls from community who are very concerned about the ravine and want to know when it's open. And I also am concerned about the ravine and would like to know when it's open. Pool and splash pad, man, it's been a rough year for that. We're still waiting for the Kentville splash pad part. The delay was that there needs to be a piece that is built and also a delay in the shipping. So we're forever hopeful we'll get in a few weeks. Under programs, again, thanking all of the summer staff who ran our camps, who ran our tennis, who did our outreach, who did our events. Again, it does not work without students, so we're forever grateful. The Spike Fund this year, because I have the numbers this time, because you keep asking me and I love it. So this year we received 20 applications, and I just want to say that this report was passed in last week. We've received 3 more since then. But at that point, $2,365 were spent on the Spike Fund, and that was specific for summer asks, right? So we have a bit of a different category. This is an increase from last year, which totaled of 9 applications over the entire year. Just because we like numbers sometimes and it's really easy, but for programs in total, we provided 657 different opportunities for recreation programs that were filled this summer, providing lasting memories and new opportunities for skill development. Again, none of it could happen without our amazing summer staff. Community outreach, our community junior recreation intern, which was a position that we hired this summer. Riley Lake filled it, and that was with a grant that we received from Canadian Parks and Recreation Association, and she did a wonderful job putting on the accessible prom. If you haven't heard Riley's story, she was volunteering with Evergreen and was helping them get ready for the prom when she found out that they didn't have any transportation and therefore had to miss the prom. And this guided this project this summer, and it was a huge success. And I will be sharing the pictures once we have them all picked apart. The summer outreach coordinators. These are 2 positions that actually came as a result of COVID and that data. So what we learned really importantly from that data is that we need to actually start looking and servicing our community differently. And that means going to people. So rather than asking people to come to us for recreation, we need to go to them because that increases the accessibility and opportunity. So our outreach coordinators were all over Kentville doing everything from arts, crafts, dance, jam, baking, I don't know what they did. They created the cookbook, all of these different things, and they did it all with community, for community, by community. Kentville Canada Cup was held on the 12th and 14th, and it was a really great kind of ease back into big national biking races. Next year we will be hosting nationals. The next 2 years we will be hosting nationals. So Craig, who is our facility manager, has already started that committee to prepare for what's about to come, which is really exciting. And then with regards to council, I just wanted to, for capital, the one thing I wanted to talk about was the dog park, because there have been questions about that. That work is scheduled to begin any day now, actually, so it's been awarded. And the first thing that they'll do is moving the ground around and getting it all planted, and then there will be fence installation. The opening date for the dog park will be in the new year. Anybody who's interested in it and fundraising for it, they can certainly call us, but there is a community group. And does anybody remember the name of them? Kentville and Area Dog Park Association, I think. Anyway, I'll get that name for everybody, but there is a community group out there that's quite organized. And then under council related, we had recently our Kentville Accessibility Action Plan. At the time of writing this, we didn't have a new chair. Unfortunately, our current chair, Spencer, had to step down because he decided to go back to school and improve his education, which is, the nerve, and didn't fit into his schedule. We are really excited for him, though. But a new chair was voted in, and I'm happy to say it was Laurel, who was just up here, so that's quite fitting. And she's going to carry us through to the new year, so that's great. We will be putting out a call, as Spencer did have to step down. There is a vacant position, so please expect that. With regards to active transportation, I'm sure Director Bell will give you an update on the current project. In terms of planning for next year's project for downtown, we're about to develop an engagement strategy to make sure that accessibility is top of mind. Obviously, KBC, all departments, and key stakeholders are engaged. And then the last piece is the regional recreation complex. We haven't yet to receive the final report from the consultant. It is due tomorrow, so therefore I have no update at this time.
Thank you very much, Director Benningfield. That was a very comprehensive report. And we have Councillor Zabian. You have the floor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thanks, Director Benningfield. I want to say thanks for all the great camps. I know I have a couple kids who had a lot of fun. I do have a couple questions. I had a few citizens, or quite a few, asked me about our irrigation systems on the fields and some of the parks. Are they functional, or?
So there was some capital work that was approved
Okay.
to repair some of them.
Okay.
And then, yeah, they.
Because just from people, and I'm not, obviously not on the field much, but I heard that they weren't on very much this year, or used very much, so I wondered.
They were on as much as they have been in other years, except when they needed repairs.
Okay,
There was an issue with the timing,
okay,
and that was fixed.
okay. And another question too, I know it's a dead horse, the splash pad. Do you know how much we've spent roughly on repairs in the last couple of years with the different issues? Could we get that, CAO? Just like to know what our expenses are to date. And is it, and I'd heard this, I don't know if this is true, that we never winterized it the first year, and that caused a lot of problems, or we didn't get the original installer back to do the winterization?
That would not be true.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. That's it. Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is the police chief, but he is not here this evening because there was no police commission meeting. And I think we're moving right along to engineering and public works. Director Bell.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. I'll start with, as I often do, with the Kentville Water Commission update. As usual with the summer season, water consumption was at its highest with around 1.2 million gallons used per day. And during this peak period, we had one of our 5 wells that pumped into town out of service with a pump failure. We actually have 7 wells, but 2 of these pump to the Kentville Business Park that services the park in the west end of town. With only 4 pumps operating for the downtown system, we are just able to keep up with the peak demand, but should another pump or well fail during this time, 3 wells wouldn't be able to meet the supply needs. So during these recent times with supply chain issues affecting virtually all industries, it is essential to have a complete pump and motor on the shelf, as they say, so that multiple weeks or even months delivery wait time can be avoided. The replacement pump and the extra shelf pump and motor are scheduled to arrive this week and will be installed in the coming days. As well, a new 6th well and 8th well overall is scheduled to be drilled this fall along the Harvest Moon Trail, just east of the most easterly well, to help with both mechanical redundancy and future growth demands. Under sanitary sewer area service, Mayor Snow, CAO Troke, and I attended a special regional sewer committee meeting on August 31st to discuss the potential award of their capital project to replace a section of the large diameter force main from the Kentville Justice Center along the edge of Miners Marsh through Klondike Street to the Glooscap Curling Club. Like many projects of late, this one came in about 80% over budget. So it was decided not to award the contract this year and to combine it with the next phase in next fiscal year from the Curling Club to Eves Hollow and tender it earlier in the year with hopes of attaining better pricing. The availability of infrastructure grants to assist in the project will also be investigated. Director Kroll has prepared a draft sanitary sewer area rate study, and we will present this to Council later this fall. Under projects, an update with the McDonald Avenue subdivision capital upgrade. Although the project got off to a slow start, The contractor has been on site since late August, and the project is underway. Construction of Phase 1 will focus on McDonald Avenue and the lower section of Henry Street, with the remainder of Henry Street and Brayside Drive completed, completed next summer as Phase 2. I received an update project schedule this morning, actually, with the proposed completion date of early November of this fall for this first phase. Under the Meadowview Bridge replacement that's been kind of ongoing for a while, the new Kentville to Meadowview Bridge that was destroyed by fire in 2021 has been replaced with a low-maintenance precast concrete bridge and has been in service since July 15th. The AT project, the first phase of the AT project was tendered in July and closed August 9th. Unlike most projects that have a large plastic pipe and excavation component to them, this project is mostly asphalt and concrete and came in under budget. Other Kentville projects that were piggybacked on this phase of the AT tender include the top lift of asphalt in Burke subdivision, sidewalk repairs and replacements on Park Street, and upgrades to the curb and sidewalk where West Main Street meets Main Street on that corner down sort of opposite the Ultramar intersection where West Main Street meets Main. So today we had a kickoff meeting with the contractor and a walk through the AT portion of the project. And they have begun prepping Burke subdivision as of today for the second lift of asphalt. Kentville Heritage Center, the replacement of the roof at 66 Station Lane has been tendered and awarded to Acadia Roofing and Contracting Limited and will be completed this fall. And that is my report.
Thank you very much, Director Bell. Okay, we do have some questions for you. Councillor Zabien, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thanks, Director Bell. I have two questions. The AT project, is there a timeline of how long that's going to take them?
This current phase, the completion date, I believe, was the 30th of November.
Okay, and that's from one end to the other?
One end.
Okay.
And that's, again, that's the entire project, which included some sidewalk work on Park Street, West Main Street, Burke subdivision. So it's
Okay.
all tied under one contract with one contractor.
Perfect, thank you. And my other question is, the Kentville Heritage Center, great that the roof is going to be replaced, but what about the other issues there, like around the windows, and there was some other things? Is that all tied in?
It's not, soffits and things are tied in with this contract.
Okay.
If they're deemed to be, unsuitable, but
Okay.
the rest of the facade was not part of the roofing project.
Okay.
No.
Is there any update, CEO, on when that, because that's been a long time now. We're going to go into be the third year of bringing that up almost, right?
Well, so actually, there was some work was done by one of our staff
Okay.
persons went down, so it was a priority here done of what needed to be done first.
Okay.
And so in that, the roof and some of the leakage in the roof became the major priority. The other items, quite frankly, after we get the roof done, we'll have to do an assessment, recognizing that a lot of these items, and you mentioned soffits and so on, some of them, if it's, scraping and painting, you do them in-house. If it's replacement, we may need to, at that point, third-party them, and whatever that cost will be, obviously, we may need to build that into a future budget.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councillor Gerard, you have the floor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Director Bell. Question about the pumps and motors in the supply chain. Knowing that things go south very rapidly especially lately with supply chains, should we have two on hand? And before you answer, because I know sometimes with furnaces, we've got a guy that will take an old pump, refurbish it, and I don't know whether, is there facilities around here that can do that, so we wouldn't need at least two extra?
Quite possibly. There's usually two components to a big pump like that. There's the very large motor, which is 3 or 4 feet long, and then there's the pump end or wet end of the pump. Usually it's one or the other, and it seems to be almost 50-50 which one fails. Sometimes it's the pump that sort of jams and burns out the motor, and you lose both all in one shot. In this case, the one that went down back in the summer was the pump itself. The motor was deemed to be still okay, so we've only ordered the pump end to match that motor. But with the delivery times and the supply chain, we ordered a complete motor and pump assembly to have on the shelf. And that's going to be our goal almost now, is to keep one always on the shelf. And, when we drilled this new well, this one, this pump, if the well is producing enough to warrant this size of a motor and pump, it'll go in that well, and we'll immediately, even before then, order one to replace that. So it's not months at this point. It has only been really weeks. We were a while leaving the pump down until we, I guess, eliminated some other potential issues that it may have been. We had to check on a check valve, it's a few things, and once we knew it was the pump, we had the well driller come up. He comes up usually on a moment's notice, and once we determined it was the pump, not the motor, he ordered it. And it's 4 or 5 weeks delivery. That's still too long if you're down, but if we have one on the shelf all the time, I think that's better than perhaps having two, for just that reason, because we could also be 3 years and not have a problem.
Yeah.
And you have to keep turning the pumps too, and make sure they don't dry out and seize up. But it's a good question.
If I may, just a
Yes, please, go
follow-up.
ahead.
If there was ever catastrophic failure of the pump systems or the well systems, how easily accessible is McGee Lake still?
Not very. I mean, the lake's there.
Yeah, no, yeah.
The intake in the dam, hasn't been maintained. It's almost 22 years now since we've used it. And the filtration plant is ready to be demolished. So we'd have raw lake water, at best, and you'd be into a $5 million treatment plant, or, good God, maybe 10, what things cost today to treat that lake water. Whereas well water, it would have to be a catastrophic failure, of course, or an environmental catastrophe or something. But we'd always want to try to explore and drill new wells in a hurry if there was something in that nature. We've been very lucky with the wells. We've got these 7 wells, and the 5 of them that are on the trail were drilled, all that same sort of time, in around 99 and 2000. And the other ones have been replaced. The 2 on Mitchell were original. They're probably their 3rd generation of drillings now, because they were drilled in the 70s for the business park when they first built the industrial park at the time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're all done, Councillor Gerard?
I am, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell, you have the floor.
For your report. I have a couple of things I'd like to run by you, but I also want to thank you for your attention to garbage cans, Mercer Davidson's railing, the aquifer on Exhibition Street. Thank you very much for attention to those matters and getting those resolved, so I really appreciate that. I'm wondering if out in our shed somewhere, we have those children playing signs. I've been approached a couple of times, and we were gonna, have people approach you directly, but they don't seem to like to do that. They seem to like to come to me and see if we can get them. There's been a request for them up in the Apple Tree subdivision, and one at the on Caldwell Oak Dean, that area. There's a lot of young children playing there. And one other thing is that the sidewalk lines over at C&J, I think it's called C&J Lunch, at the corner of Exhibition and Cornwallis. I don't know if we paved over them or if somebody paved over them, and the sidewalk lines are pretty much non-existent now. And so what they're finding is that the cars are parking on top of those sidewalk lines, and people are having to go out onto the road to access the other sidewalk across Woodworth Avenue, I believe, there. And I'm wondering if we can freshen the paint up there.
So this is the diner on Exhibition.
Yeah,
in
the diner
Cornwallis.
on Exhibition,
So
yeah.
the lines you speak of are on Exhibition Street more so.
They're on Exhibition Street,
Right,
yeah.
where the parking lot,
Where that little wee parking lot is, but they're just painted lines.
I think we did some patch paving, or the contractor patch paved some potholes there, and probably that's you know, the potholes were probably
Yeah.
in where the
Right.
lines were. So
Yeah.
we need to do some line refreshing, also down at the lights at the new bridge. But that means, certainly, traffic control with as busy a place as that is.
Yeah.
But I'll certainly get them to do
Yeah,
some
just wanted to bring it-
refreshing up on Exhibition Street.
Just freshen it up on Exhibition, that would be great. And, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Director Bell, I just have one quick question. It's with respect to the sanitary sewer area service. And I know I wasn't at that meeting because I was ill, so I wasn't able to attend. But with respect to the project coming in 80% over budget and decided not to award it this year and combine it with next year, will there be any negative impact with not doing the project this year and waiting until going into next year? And are they hoping that the cost of same will come down considerably, or like 10, 15%? Percentage? That's the end of my question.
Sure, thank you.
No,
So the force main goes, this one is the one from RG5 in behind the old county building, or now the Justice Center.
Right.
Runs through the back parking lot, along the edge of Miners Marsh, down Klondike, cuts across, goes sort of cross-country towards the curling club, under the brook, then gets into the trail system, sort of goes on the north side of the trail, all the way to Eves Hollow. From that point on, from Eves Hollow to the plant in New Minas, those, I think, 3 phases over the last 15 years have replaced that section of force main. So it's from Eves Hollow, basically it's a section in town that hasn't been replaced.
Right.
And they didn't do it in that way for any real reason other than they had more breaks on the section, sort of on the New Minas side of things, and they worked basically backwards from the plant towards town. There's been very few breaks as late. One was down near the marsh in a
Right.
sensitive area. And that section of the boardwalk approach from sort of the Leverett corner into the back part of the marsh. They had to take a section of that boardwalk, we'll call it, out. That's been the last, I think there's been one other minor break somewhere in behind Miners Landing on the trail, maybe just after that. But then you can go multiple years without another one. It's ductile iron. It's a good, it's a good force main. It's 40 plus years old.
Sure.
But to predict it, we can go a long time. I don't see a big risk. If there's a break, yeah, it's a $15,000 repair on average. But to have a project that's almost 1.8 times over the budget, $800,000 budget, I believe. So you can
Right.
do the math, I guess, whatever that is. It was up there. It wasn't double, but it was close.
Right.
If anything, if they're going to spend more money, and there was another tender, so I think there probably will be another meeting. There's a meeting next week, I
Yes.
believe, that will discuss the aeration upgrades that closed perhaps last week. So that needs to be talked about. And that one, I think, is more pressing. We all know the
Right.
issues with odors.
Absolutely,
and
with the odors.
so that's desludging, phase 2 desludging and odors. So
Right.
if there's a priority to put on anything, it would be,
It
to
would
me,
be
it would
the
be upgrades to the plant over the force line.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I think that concludes our questions, Director Bell. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next, we have our CAO.
Thank you very much. So one of the things I just wanted, and I included here under financial because it will undoubtedly, as we move forward, have some financial consideration. Director Bell and myself had started having some conversation with Kings County with regards to RG 5, 6, and 7. As the town sees more and more development coming along, as Kings sees more development out the Colebrook Way, those pumping stations become pressure points. And not so much in that they don't have the capacity, it's capacity during major events. So thinking about heavy rain, when frost comes out of the ground and so on. And a large part of that is obviously driven off of, we have a lot of gutter systems and sump pumps that are tied into our system back in the 70s and 80s and so on. So part of this is about new construction and what the pressures are going to be putting on the system, but also part of this is about thinking about how we would want to be working to try and take some of the existing pressures off of the system. And so those conversations started with Kings, where we've been, obviously, we talked to this from the Kentville perspective, but they're talking about it from pressure from new developments in other areas. And there's going to be obviously a series of work that needs to be done, but also this is also to try and educate ourselves to be able to have this from a financial perspective, what the implications would be as we go forward. Training, there's been emergency measures training. Actually, we were able to hold here in these chambers in person the 100 series courses, and they haven't been held for a while. And a lot of them were actually held basically online over time. So we were able to work with Dan Stovall and have training, and then there was some tabletop exercises were conducted as well. Intermunicipal service agreements, the CAOs are meeting ongoing. And obviously there's some work underway with regards to the pilot for Annapolis Valley Waste and with regards to King's Transit itself. The boundary review we're going to speak of a little bit later tonight. There is obviously some work been going on with the community around the Housing Action Plan, which you saw some of the slides on that tonight. And we've also been having a series of meetings, particularly with regards to things like PACE. There is a proposed bylaw in our package tonight, and also with regards to animal control, as our conversations around chickens, the draft will come here this evening. So the other piece I'll just point to is Mentoring Plus has supplied the quarterly report here. For those who are interested in having any conversations with Mentoring Plus, they're actually co-located now down at the Valley Business Hub. So while we support them in many different ways, their physical location is down to 448 Main Street. They put together a good quarterly report here on some of the things that they've been expanding over the last little while. And talking about some of the sessions that they're going to be holding between September and October.
Thank you very much, CAO. Does anybody have any questions for the CAO? Councillor Zabian, you have the floor.
Thank you. CEO, I just have two questions. The first one, and perhaps I should have asked Councillor Huntley if there's any update on her request. A lot of people have been asking her request to join FCM.
So anything with regards to her request to join FCM?
Yeah, I thought I guess maybe I can't really direct it to her, but.
Well, so what I would say is that was approved, that would be something that would come back to council.
No, not a request for the travel if she's been accepted to be part of it. Yeah.
Again, I think that would be an update that would be probably more appropriate council than at CAC.
Okay. And my other question is, you're doing the community economic development report, right? Are you, unless it's in here, I think it's just in a different spot.
Oh, I'd be happy to go back to it, I think. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go to the rest of the councillors, and then I'll ask CAO Trout to do the
Okay, thank you.
Community Economic Development Report. And I apologize, I don't know that that was on the
I
agenda.
think it was mixed somewhere.
I think it was, because I had it separately here. Okay, Councillor Gerard, you have the floor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a quick question, Mr. CAO. The Housing Action Plan, are they engaging, do you know, and I don't even know whether you're a part of it, but are they engaging developers as well as the other folks that they talked about?
So the broader group that is bigger than just those organizations that are working at a Kentville, there is everything from the formation of a new nonprofit that would do work on its own and hold units and work with the development community. So they actually have a gentleman who used to work with Housing Nova Scotia, working with them. His name is Earl Milkey. So he's been kind of helping them with the planning side of things. I also know that they have had fairly extensive conversations with both Housing Nova Scotia, but also Community Services around potential envelopes where either they would partner with private sector developers or that could enhance some of the existing development some of these organizations may already have. So I know those pieces are going on. I don't know the level at which those conversations have progressed though.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. CAO, I have several questions as these came up. the end of July after our council meeting and through August, and sorry for all of them. Did a representative from the town of Kentville attend the Northeast Kings graduation in June and present our bursaries? If this didn't happen, why didn't it happen?
I guess first of all, my understanding is that there was an issue with regards to making the physical presentation, but my understanding is that subsequent to that, the issue was addressed.
Thank you. I am the chair of the committee, so for student bursaries, and I was never asked to go and present those bursaries, and I think it's really remiss, and the second time that we've made a miss with our students at NECEC and not fulfilling our role as a town. And in future, if we don't have a representative to go, I would like to be asked to go as the chair of that committee. I don't think it's right not to have somebody there. And along with that, I would like to know if the Hill family was informed of who won their bursary, their scholarship. That was a $1,500 scholarship in memory of a former counselor, Nola Folker Hill. And the family has been presenting that regularly, and I'm wondering if the family was asked to go and present that bursary at NECEC.
I would have to look into it. I actually don't know if that's occurred or not.
I think that what you'll find is that no one was asked to go and present that bursary. And again, it's remiss. It does not look good on the town of Kentville to miss out on our students' graduations and the presentations of student bursaries from the town of Kentville. And definitely the Hill family should have been informed and asked if they would like to go and attend. And again, I would have done that for them if they were unable to attend. Another question I have is with the comfort station. We just heard from presentation tonight how very important it is that we have places for our people and our citizens to go and especially to use the bathroom. And I was under the impression that we had a location, we had a grant, and we were all set to go. And then suddenly I read here that things have changed. And I'm wondering what happened there. As far as I knew last time, it was going at the back of the Light Touch Laser building. Could you please explain what happened there?
So I can't speak to who you would have been speaking to about where it would have been going, but what I can speak to is we actually had 5 or 6 locations, including one was looking at constructing our own. And what's happened is 2 of the locations that we were looking at, we had a third party who was willing to enter into a longer term lease than the site we were looking at. So we still have 3 locations that we're working on. I can't speak to as to what the stages of those discussions are in, but there were multiple locations. There wasn't one location specifically that we were looking at on that.
But it seems like that's just been put on the back burner now. And I think of all the things that we're doing, that is one of the most important things that we can provide to our community at the moment. And we did have a grant for that, and now it seems to be being put off to some other thing, and the washrooms are being set aside. And I think we should get onto that and get that situation rectified.
Well, I assure you, Councillor, there's been discussions on that with folks. It's not a single group here. We're working collectively on it.
Yeah.
Also, we have a grant. No, we had a grant. We have a grant. And so that work continues to move forward. We're trying to secure the best location we can based upon the parameters.
Okay. My next question is, and the chief wasn't here tonight, so I'll ask you this question. I just wonder why the police commission is included under the town's committee policy. Because the police commission is governed by the Nova Scotia Police Act, and the police commission has its own bylaws. Now, no other committee that is involved under the Town of Kentville committee policy has this type of setup. So considering that politics should be at an arm's length when it comes to the police commission, I'm wondering why the town has the police commission sitting underneath that policy. So I'm just looking for an explanation.
Is this something that would come at council, or unless you're?
No, I'm happy to.
Sure, okay, great, okay.
A town actually doesn't even need to have its own bylaw. You can simply allow the police act and you create a structure. Kentville had a bylaw, and that bylaw, of course, as you're aware, there were some revisions came both from the commission and from council, and we've gone through first reading of some potential changes to that. Every committee gets its authority from the town. So commissions, even in other municipal units, when you look at what HRM has, the budgets get approved by the town. So they are not that arm's length, and that they operate 100% autonomously without authority coming through the municipal unit. The autonomy comes in them setting strategic direction for the police force.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether they were, how long their terms were, how connected they are, as long as a commission is creating that strategic plan, they can't delve into operations because that's where the chief gets his authority from the Police Act. So Kentville had a bylaw. There's some changes that were proposed with regards to that. Some municipal units have them. Some of them create them in a way that there's different terms and different configurations. But basically, Kentville had made the decision to create their own, obviously some time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe at one point even the commission had changed in the size of the commission, in the number of individuals that were on it.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. And the last question is that my understanding, and I could be wrong, is that the bylaw came from the police commission, was given to you as CAO, and then CAO would bring it to council. However, the bylaw that was brought to council was not the same bylaw as was given from the police commission. So there were changes in that bylaw, or alterations made after it left the commission before it came to council. And I'm wondering who did that, and I thought council was the decision-making body.
So, Councillor, you'll probably recall, I received it. It was then circulated to council, and council was asked to provide feedback. And so the feedback from council goes into the edited version that comes back to council. And then council has the purview of accepting that or making further changes.
Okay. I thought, okay, that's not exactly the way I thought it happened.
And just to be clear, I've had extensive conversations with the chair of the board around this. So
Okay.
he's aware of this as well.
Okay, I just was trying to clear up my own brain here. Yeah, well, all right, I'll have to look at that. All right, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Thank you, CAO. Councillor Zabin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's not really a question, just want to make sure I understand. I think what we received from the police commission was an edited version before we had discussion on it. We didn't receive I think that's what Councillor Maxwell was saying, if I remember. We received a different version than what they drafted. So somebody, whether it was you or whoever, altered it and then gave us to look at.
You
That's-
actually received a version that we asked for feedback, then that feedback created an edited version that came back. So it was sent out to all of council.
We didn't get the original one from police commission.
Yeah, I believe you did, because I believe council provided that feedback, and then we'll call it the straw dog that
Right.
came back.
I don't remember it that way. I thought we got a different version than what they had drafted.
Well, the
Yeah.
version that you voted on.
Right.
Was the version with council's edits in it.
Okay, thank you. It's not how I remember it, but thank you.
Okay.
Economic development?
I think Councillor Maxwell, is
Sorry.
this a repeat?
Yeah.
Sorry, let me give you the floor.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm not clear, and I'm gonna have to go back and check on that. But what I'm saying is that the bylaw that came from from commission to council, the very first time was not the same bylaw that we did up at the commission. And so council then gave opinions on an edited bylaw that was not the bylaw that we sent out to council. All right, so that's something I'm gonna check on, but that's the way I remember it, anyway. So I
And-
won't ask you to comment, that's. the
Yeah,
way-
I just will say, we'll look into that as well,
Yeah.
because, okay, thank you for that. Okay, we're going to go back to economic development.
Sure thing.
CAO, thank you.
Thank you very much. So, the historic Kentville video project has started shooting. There's a bit of a revised timeline on that, but that work continues. The KBC Mural Festival, great success, although there was some weather and temperatures obviously played an impact on that. But coming out of it, there is a public art map that's being created in order to enhance this as we go forward. So this is going to be something that's going to help us promo the festival even farther. The Kentville Pumpkin People Festival is on as usual in October. We've had a couple of different little supply issues with regards to getting clothing for our pumpkin people. But we want to have a big thanks to Open Arms and Carlton Road Industries who were able to help us out with that. And in fact, have really been doing a great job even on the labor intensive side of getting the materials ready, have really been helping us out. There's a couple of new beautification items that are coming forward for Center Square. These are going to be to be visible between now and October. There is also some items being supported by Develop Nova Scotia with regards to our placemaking initiative through KBC. And there's also a few capital purchases with regards to Center Square. So those are just a few of the highlights with regards to economic development.
Thank you, CAO Troke. And does anybody have any questions for the CAO with respect to Community Economic Development Report? Seeing none, we will move forward into business arising from the minutes. And I believe if you folks wish to leave, you're able to do so. Thank you very much for your work this evening. The animal control bylaw is the next item on the agenda. And CAO, can you please provide an update to council on this matter?
I sure can. Thank you very much. So basically, coming out of July meeting of council advisory, we had put before council a number of considerations with regards to changes in the animal control bylaw that were specifically with regards to backyard chickens. And so one of the things that is included in the package tonight is an edited version. You'll see the items that are in red would be the items where we've either added or made adjustments to the animal control bylaw to accommodate for definitions, to accommodate for numbers of chickens and size of lots and whatnot. The questions, of course, that we had brought forward were regarding, and this was in July, with regards to should there be registration for chickens, should there be a fee, and what size with regards to those flocks. And so working off the feedback, there was no registration mandatory, but we did suggest that there would be a voluntary reason for folks here to register, particularly if anybody had larger numbers of chickens than we have here today, because we did build a bit of a grandfathering clause into this as well. And when it came to a sliding scale, which was some of the conversation that happened at council, we did include a sliding scale, but what we did is we started with a relatively large lot, 4,000 square meters. But anybody with that size or smaller would be eligible to have at least 10 chickens. And so, because we do have some lots in Kenville that are significantly larger than that, we had essentially did a sliding scale that goes 10, 15, 20, 25. And there's also specification in here with regards to the size of the chicken coop itself, how far the chicken coop needs to be set back, and particularly if you're on water courses or whatnot. So I recognize there's a few pieces here that are an attempt for us to kind of come up with, I'll call it a middle ground in some of the conversation. But really, what I would suggest is it's an opportunity for folks to take a look at it. And we're looking, as always, for whatever feedback we can have with regards to this as a potential change to the animal control bylaw. There was also, just for clarity, we had some conversation with the SPCA as well, just with regards to some of the work that they're doing in other municipal units, not just around chickens, but animal control in general. The chief's been having some conversations with those folks, and basically around supporting in the event that there was ever situations where we didn't have expertise in dealing with certain types of animals. So I just share that as another piece that's come out of this.
Okay, thank you very much. So we do have a motion that CAC recommend first reading to council of the amended animal control bylaw at the September 26th, 2022 council meeting. Do I have somebody to motion that? Okay, so we'll go with Councillor York for the first, go with Councillor Huntley for the second, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, Councillor Giroux, may I?
Whenever you would like to hear from me.
Okay, thank you. We'll go with Councillor Gerard first. You have the floor.
Sorry, Jeff. One question to CAO. Again, any complaints about chickens up till now?
I'm not aware of any.
And I guess this, again, would go to Dan. In writing this, did staff go out and look at any chicken coops, or did they, even outside of the town limits, to go and see how they work?
Most of it's been discussion with counterparts and other municipal units, kind of some of the trials and tribulations as this kind of has evolved over time. But I cannot speak to if there's any specific visitations of chicken coops here in the town.
Okay, thank you.
Solicitor, you have the floor.
I don't want to splash any cold water on this, so this could move forward, but I have given the CAO some input on this draft, where I think some language needs to be clarified around intent. So just as an easy example, the coop is defined in the bylaw, and that includes the enclosure, but yet, as I read it, chickens can run free as long as the property is fenced. From the perspective of enforcement, I'm not sure what the difference is between and why the non-roofed portion of the coop is included in the square footage if your chickens can run around your entire yard, for example. So there are some issues like that arise, and also clarifying the specific offense. There's just some language that isn't consistent with the rest of the bylaw. I didn't believe this was moving forward to first reading today, CAO, only because I understood from the report that you were waiting for some input from the police department. So I thought perhaps there was more time for this to be addressed. Those would be my comments.
So certainly if it went to first reading, solicitor, and there needed to be additional changes made to the such bylaw, they could be made at first reading, or,
They could, and perhaps it won't get past this meeting. Perhaps it won't be
Sure.
referred to council, and then if that's the case, then the police aren't in as much of a hurry to give feedback. But if you do move it forward, they know they've got the next 2 weeks, if that's what we've got between now and council.
okay. CAO?
Thank you. And so part of our challenge here is that, to be frank, we really don't have, from a bylaw enforcement perspective, someone necessarily trained in how to address if you had too many chickens. So there is a piece there that, from a perspective of what do you do, and so that's part of the work that the chief is clearly looking at, and obviously having conversations with his counterparts in other areas. But it is on the bylaw enforceability side. It doesn't stop with that piece just around chickens, because people may have other animals, exotic pets, what have you, and it is one of those pieces that you don't typically have an organization where somebody is trained in handling all of those things. So how do you work with supporting groups around what would you do if? So that's a piece, kind of, we'll say there is an operational component to this, but in addition to that, and the solicitor has referenced, there are sections of this that, probably could be considered for rewrite on things such as even dogs. But at this point in time, our attempt was to make sure that we had an opportunity to include the capacity to have chickens. And then as we work through the operational components of some of these other things, there would probably be a need for some rewrites as we go forward.
If I might, as a follow-up, the one issue that comes to mind that would be, I suggest, valuable for CAC to discuss is what's intended on the grandfathering clause. So as I read the current draft of the grandfathering clause, there's no limits. So you're not even limited to how many you have today. So typically grandfathering would be, if you've got too many today, that's what you've got. And you're allowed to keep that, but you're not allowed to double the size of your flock. I think this current draft would allow doubling the size of your flock. I don't know whether that's the intent. I just throw that in.
Councillor York, you go ahead. I'll say something after you. You go ahead, please. You have the floor.
It is unrelated to chickens, but it is related to the bylaw, so my apologies. Sorry. We have a licensing fee for dogs presently. Is that a moneymaker for the town of Kentville? Is that a necessary item to keep in? And how many dogs are registered in the town of Kentville annually? Do we know that number?
I don't have it, but I can get it for you.
So I suspect there are many more dogs living in the town of Kentville than are licensed to live in the town of Kentville. And I would suggest that perhaps removing a fee to own a dog as issued by the town of Kentville might be appropriate.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, it's the will of council, but it almost sounds like perhaps we might be a little bit premature bringing this forward at CAC, and that maybe we're not ready to go to first reading, and we may want to send it back to staff to revisit it. That's just my own thought. And I'm sorry, I didn't see the other two names up, or I would have gone last. Councillor Maxwell, you have the floor.
Thank you. I thought maybe we were doing second reading on this bylaw, but I see it's just first reading, so. I'm wondering, CAO, did anyone consult an expert in the field of animals and animal control and raising chickens? In other words, a veterinarian or someone from Agri-Canada or someone from Chicken Breeders of Nova Scotia?
My understanding is the conversations have mainly been with other municipal units who've had particularly chickens in their bylaw for a period of time.
Right.
But I do not know if there's been a chicken expert or if a veterinarian was discussing this. At this moment, it was more about getting a draft for council to look at and see if this was heading in the right direction the council would want.
Right, okay, so I've been doing a lot of reading and a lot of research on this topic, and I'm well aware that you cannot take everything that you read on the internet as the truth. So after doing some reading and some research and talking to some people, I went and talked to a veterinarian today. And I spoke to Dr. Mike McGowan, who is the large animal vet at the Annapolis Animal Hospital. So I think we have a problem making bylaws when we're not consulting experts. And I think it's a huge mistake. And I'm going to explain why. So for the ease of understanding, I'm going to liken this to the debate on sex education in schools, because that makes everybody perk up. When I was a young teenager, teen pregnancy was huge. It was a huge problem, a huge issue. We had little to no sex education at the time, and teens were getting their information primarily from each other. This, I think, is how most of the information is being acquired by people who are looking after chickens. Very few, if any, are confirming what they research, or better yet, talk with Agri-Canada, Chicken Breeders of Nova Scotia, or local vets. As I said today, I had a discussion with Dr. Mike McGowan, the large animal veterinarian at Annapolis Animal Hospital. And I had some questions, and I wanted to verify what I had read. And Dr. McGowan was very informative, and he said I could quote him. So if you have any issues, you can go and give him a call. He told me the correlation between rats and chickens is 100%. 100%. With chickens, you will have rats. The more chickens you have, the greater the rat population will be. It does not matter how rodent-proof or clean you keep your coop. They're predators. They will be there sniffing around. This confirms what my neighbors are seeing. And Councillor Gerard, you've lived in this town long enough to know that many residents don't contact the town when they're upset, they contact the councillors. And I've been inundated by neighbors who live between Oakdean Avenue and Wade Street who are seeing rats, and I brought this up last time. In my area alone, there are 3 within a very short distance. I've lived in this area for most of my life, that would be well over 60 years, and only recently have I seen rats or other rodents and listened to neighbors complaining about rats. They have them in their sheds, garages, they've seen them in their bird feeders, and in their gardens. I would say we have a rat infestation problem in that area of town at the moment. Rats are not nice, clean rodents, and as we all know, they bring disease. We have children in our area, young children. We just had a new child born last week in our area. The parents love gardening. They do not want rat bites when they're out in their gardens. Regarding the number of chickens to allow, Dr. McGowan told me that we should liken it to the number of dogs or cats that you think the residents would put up with. 1 cat, 1 dog, 2 maybe acceptable, 5 probably not. And that's assuming that those animals are kept in good, clean surroundings and well cared for, but also keeping in mind that there are predators for chickens. We must remember we are a town where residents live close to each other. We cannot think only about ourselves and our friends. Smells come from composting the excrement. Rodents are there, diseases, all much easier to contain in agricultural areas where people do not live in close proximity to each other. Dr. McGowan also says that inspections, should they be going to occur, should be for cleanliness of coops. And I would also add containers of feed and waste disposal. That would be a given. But I need to be very clear that raising chickens does not, so that would be his recommendation. Definitely we would have someone going around and checking. I need to be very clear that raising chickens does not help those who are food insecure, as some people might think. You need to look into the expense involved in raising chickens. That expense far outweighs the cost of a dozen eggs. Feed is not cheap. Materials to build a rodent-proof coop are not cheap. The work necessary to maintain a rodent-proof coop and raise chickens in a clean environment is time-consuming. Appropriate containers need to be had because my neighbor found that the rats that were in her garage had eaten right through her plastic garbage cans. And they had to switch to metal.
Councillor Maxwell, are you getting close to being done?
I'm just getting
Yeah,
close. I think this is important for council to
Absolutely it
hear.
is. There's just another councillor that
Okay.
wants to speak. Yeah.
These are not one-time expenses. These are ongoing costs. The people who I know who are raising chickens are not food insecure. On passing this bylaw, council will need to put a line in the budget for extermination services to rid an area of rats where chicken coops exist. After all, we will be perpetuating the rat problem, and residents should not have to pay for this necessary service. This would be ongoing if we have chickens in town. Because we will need to provide extermination services, it will be necessary to know who has the chickens, and a fee will probably be needed to help defer some of the cost of extermination. Considering all that I have learned, the health, the safety, and residential living in town of our residents, I don't see how I'll be able to support this bylaw. I don't think chickens or any other livestock at this particular time should be allowed in town. We have an agricultural area in the county for reasons. And if we pass this bylaw, as Dr. McGowan has said, we have to expect the rats, and feel free to give them a call. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Zabien, you have the floor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just heeding on the advice of our solicitor and looking through this, I think we're kind of jumping the gun on sending this to first reading. I think we should sit down and draft it the way that we think it fits. I think we've gone from talking about it, I know we had our break, which probably maybe was the need to put this in so urgently tonight, but we had a discussion last week and it's come back so, it looks finished, but it's not. Listening to the solicitor, there's a lot of holes there and I'm not comfortable saying that to first reading myself. I can only speak for myself, but I'd rather see a clear-cut document that we're all agreeable on that we can send out, and until then, I think this is just it's a draft, right? And I don't think we should waste time sending it out until we're sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor York, you have the floor.
Thank you. I appreciate Councillor Maxwell's passion and her research. I do want to reiterate that rats are part of urban, suburban living. They are attracted by things like bird feeders as well as anything else. And my understanding of homesteading and chicken owners on a smaller scale and not the industrial scale that perhaps would attract hordes and hordes of rats is that people who keep chickens for eggs and for chickens would certainly want to avoid rats at any cost, as rats would be detrimental to their product. So I think there's, to Councillor Zabian's point, there's a lot left to unpack and perhaps some more research to be done. But there are many areas in town that have rats and don't have chickens. So I think it would be hubris for us to imply that rats are the byproduct of chickens when they do exist in our community without chickens as well. So we need to keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you, Councillor York. Just before I go to you, Councillor Maxwell, because you have spoken already, is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this topic? Knowing that probably I'll ask for the first and second motions to be withdrawn, and then we'll refer it back to staff. No, okay. Go ahead, Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate that I have lived in my area for 60 years. I have never seen a rat or a mouse or anything else in that residential area in 60-plus years. We now have an infestation in an area with 3 coops within shooting distance. I don't think that you can discount that. And I think staff needs to look into that. I think they need to talk to the experts about it before we open our town up, our entire town up, to something that sounds really good. Let's have some chickens and have some fresh eggs. Right? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Oh, Councillor Gerard.
I'm sorry, but I want to say.
That's okay, you have the floor.
I've lived up there, not for 60-plus years, I've lived there for 20-some years, and the property we have next to our house, we've had bait stations for probably 15 years because of compost and bird feeders and stuff like that. The chicken bylaw has only been in since 2016, 2017. We all voted on it, or the previous council. So, you know, I could throw a baseball and hit Councillor Maxwell's house, and there we've had, like I said, bait stations up there for at least 15 years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gerard. Okay, Councillor Maxwell, and this should tie things up.
One more comment. Councillor Gerard is probably absolutely right. Apartment buildings are notorious for having rodent issues, especially when the compost is readily available. However, Councillor Gerard, as a good landlord, puts those there. I don't think that residents should have to pay an extermination service to look after rats around their property. And that's what we need to think about. We need to think about every single resident in this town. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if I'm hearing everybody and we are heeding the solicitor's advice, probably what we would look to do, or I would look to see if Councillor Huntley and Councillor York wish to retract their motions. Yes, yes, okay. And then we send this back to staff, taking into consideration the content of the discussion. Is everybody okay with that? Yes, okay, good. We'll move on. Next item is the municipal boundary report. CAO Turk.
Thank you. So every 8 years, in accordance with the Municipal Government Act, municipalities are required to review their electoral boundaries and size of council. Kenfill's was last completed in 2014, and in 2014, this was completed by town hall staff, and there was approximately 30 surveys were returned as part of that process. In this year, the review, staff created a short survey asking residents about their preferred size of council, looking at 5, 7, or 9 elected officials. From June to August, staff promoted these surveys, and we achieved 84 responses during that time period. Now, 79 of these are considered valid because these were confirmed to be residents of the town. And of that, 40 or approximately 50%, voted for 7 elected officials as their preferred representation. There is a second component of a review, which typically you would start looking at the electoral system itself. So do you have one single electoral district, or do you have districts broken up? And typically the latter question is one, as you have geographic expansion, or if you had a massive increase in population, those would be items that you would typically begin to dig deeper into. So for example, in the county, because of geography, it might be more appropriate to have a counselor in specific areas versus saying that you would have the entire group to be at large. So, and based on the fact that there were no real significant factors that increased this, the report that we're bringing back this evening, we're basically making 2 recommendations with regards to the boundary review. The first recommendation is that council recommend to maintain the size of council at 7 elected officials, and the council maintain the current electoral system of 1 electoral district and use the at-large voting system. So those would be the 2 pieces that we're bringing back to council as based on the survey work that's been done. Of course, this would be a piece of work that we would forward on to the province as a result of where we are, but we want to come back with the results for council with those recommendations, or recommendation would be moved forward to council at the next meeting.
Great, thank you, CAO. So the motion is that CAC recommend that council recommend to the Utility and Review Board to maintain the current size of council at 7 elected officials at the September 26, 2022 council meeting. Could I have somebody motion that? Thank you, Councillor Gerard, and a seconder, Councillor York. Discussion. Hearing none, I'll call for the question. The question is that CAC recommend the council recommend. I'm so.
That's okay.
Go ahead, Councillor Maxwell, you have the floor.
I don't really know how to put this, but I have often felt on this council that we were not needed. We 6 councillors. I've often felt that. That comes out to about $170,000 a year in savings, I do believe. The reason I feel that is because many times I feel like council is being led in their decision-making. And we're not really freely making decisions. And if that's the case, if my feelings are correct, then we only need 1 citizen representative, 1 CAO, and a solicitor to guide the legal. And I've seen that this leading go on so many times here. And through not just this term, but my entire first term. And it makes it difficult for me as a councillor and citizen in this town to take any monetary money from taxes, dollars of hard-working citizens to be led in my decision-making. It makes it really difficult, and I just have to put that out there. And people can go back and look at the many meetings that we have on video. All of my meetings are on video in my first term and now. That halfway through this term, that's 7 or 6 years. And you can see the leading that goes on. And if you were freely if you were paying your tax dollars to people like me sitting up here who freely made decisions based on what they know that the citizens or feel strongly that the citizens want, then, and they do the work and they do then yeah, that's fine. But if that doesn't happen, then, and I don't feel it does a lot of times, then I feel very much like we're taking something from the public that we really shouldn't be doing. And I just have to put it out there because that's how I feel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other further discussion? Okay, ready for the question? The question is that sorry, I thought I saw somebody else. The question is that council recommend to the Utility and Review Board to maintain the current size of the council at 7 elected officials at the September 26, 2022 council meeting. Voting is now open. Okay, voting is now closed. And the motion is carried with one no. Sorry, I always like to read that out. The motion is carried.
Mine was no, but it came up. Yeah. You don't have the wrong. You know what? I have yours. That would explain
Okay.
That would explain lots.
Okay, so either way though, so just for the minutes.
Why don't I redo that vote?
Let's do that, let's do that, yes. Would you like me to read the motion again? Anybody? Okay, all right, so.
Yeah, you should redo all the votes.
Uh-oh. That's all right.
Number of council.
Open vote, okay. Voting is now open. Okay, voting is now closed, and it is the majority, so the motion is passed. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the tidal power proposal. I'm sorry, you're correct, there is a second motion. And the second motion is that, thank you, Jennifer, that CAC recommend to council that CAC recommend to the Utility and Review Board to maintain the current electoral system of one electoral district and use the at-large voting system at the September 26, 2022 council meeting. Do I have somebody to motion that first? Councillor Zabian? Okay, I saw Councillor Huntley second. And discussion around that motion? Okay, no discussion, so you're ready for the question. The question is that council recommend to the Utility and Review Board to maintain the current electoral system of one electoral district and use the at-large voting system at the September 26, 2022 council meeting. And voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Now we will go on to the Town of Annapolis Royal Title Proposal Update. And CAO, we've been provided with an update from the Town of Annapolis.
Thank you. Previously at council, there'd been some discussion about this request that had come from the Town of Annapolis Royal. The request was made if Director Bell could have some conversations with Annapolis Royal with regards to the technology. Those discussions had occurred where Director Bell was able to have discussion with regards to the prototypes, the testing that was done, and he was able to confirm that Dalhousie, NSCC, and Saluna Energy, who had gone through these prototype testing, were able to confirm for him that the tidal power turbines and the process from an engineering perspective is all valid. And that during that 18-month, 24-month period, getting the turbines up and running, being able to validate I'm going to use the term speed of the turbines, which allowed for a certain number of kilowatts to be produced. All of that work would then provide for the partnership what the expected rate of return is beyond the pilot stage. And of course, during the pilot stage, there is no return on those making the investment. It's the partners would be providing 10%, while the Green Energy Fund, or actually FCM, would be supplying, I believe it's through the Green Energy Fund, the 90% needed to build the rest of the project out. I did have a conversation with the CAO in the town of Annapolis Royal as well. She had said that the understanding of the expenditures described here were 100% of the expenditures that were set up for the pilot stage. If the partners came together at the end of the pilot and wished to scale up even larger than what the pilot was, obviously at that point in time, there would have to be a conversation with regards to what the expenses would be versus what the rate of return would be on that. So I was able to confirm all of the financial costs were in this request, and the $22,300 of each partner is equally spread over a 2-year period, meaning $11,150 would be the requirement for the first year, meaning this fiscal year, and $11,150 for next fiscal year, with the results coming back to the partners at the end of, actually expected at the end of 18 to 24 months, with regards to then moving forward in rates of return.
Is it 11,150 or 11,500?
It was 22,300 per partner.
Okay, sorry.
And so 11,150 per year.
11,150, okay.
And so the pilot project would put 5 to 7 turbines in place, with the outcome expected of 20 kilowatts or more, with basically the expectation that once the partners were in place, the final application would go to FCM looking for the 90% funding to allow the project to then move forward. So Director Bell did not have any reservations with regards to the technology. And so we wanted to bring it to CAC so that it could be brought forward to council for consideration if they were interested in making the investment or not.
So CAO, just for clarification, the amount is 22,300?
Over 2 years, correct.
Okay, I just have to amend that here. Okay. So, council, the motion would read that CAC recommend that council approve participation in the Town of Annapolis Royal Tidal Power Project and further approve allocation of the necessary funding to the project of $22,300 over 2 years, and approve the first year funding of $11,150 outside of the current approved 2022-2023 budget at the September 26th, 2022 council meeting. Do I have somebody to motion that? Okay, Councillor Gerard, and a seconder. Okay, I do not have a seconder. So.
I'll second it for discussion.
Oh, okay, thank you, Councillor York. Okay, I don't think I need to read the motion again, so we have a first and a seconder. It is on the floor for discussion. Let's have discussion. Unless we don't need to have discussion. I don't see anybody coming up yet. Oh, Councillor Maxwell.
I'll start a discussion. I find this kind of confusing. Is all the monies that we're being asked to put toward this coming from FCM? Or are we putting our money into this project?
Each partner over 2 years would put in 22,300, and the other 90% needed to complete the project would come from FCM.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Gerard, you have the floor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Dan, what does, you've obviously had, this was submitted by Director Bell, and his recommendation was a letter of support. To me, this is, if he's looked into it as I think, we should before we invest in it, this is more secure than solar or wind because the tide rises twice a day. Your thoughts and what he thinks.
What Director Bell communicated to me was that because of the amount of eyes that from Dalhousie, the community colleges and so on, and the due diligence, he felt, and while not an expert in turbines, he felt that all the individuals who had looked at it and the due diligence meant that the system was sound. And so really from a technology perspective, he felt that, and I guess also the fact that 90% of the cost of this project would be coming from a third party. So I think he felt that, it would give you the opportunity to do your analysis, get electrical generation, and then by buying in as a partner, while you're not receiving any return in the first 2 years, you would be in a situation in year 3 where you would start reaping some benefit from it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor York.
Is there any information, CAO, about what our buy-in would look like after it was up and running and successful?
You can't.
You can't. It's now or nothing. And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly because I have a cold and I'm feeling perhaps a little bit of brain fog. Our investment of the 22.3, is that on the condition that they receive 90% funding, or do we put that in regardless of whether they receive the 90%?
We're basically saying we would guarantee that, which will allow the application to go to FCM.
Right.
And then if FCM approves it, then you've got the money to do the project.
Okay.
Without the FCM approval, the project won't go forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask a question as the deputy mayor, not as the chair. And it's sort of dovetails off what Councillor York said. But is there any way to know what our return on investment would this be? Like what potentially could it look like? I just think about, a cash outlay of 22.3 and it's a lot of money. And I know it's over 2 years, but it's a lot of money. And I'm just trying to, I think it would be helpful to get a sense of what our return on investment potentially might be, what that might look like.
Yeah, I think the whole intention of this as a pilot would be to see what the 5 to 7 generators on a consistent basis would generate over that, let's call it an 18, 24-month period. We know we'd be guaranteed at that point 53 cents a kilowatt. So there's a guarantee from the Utility Review Board on that. So at that point in time, but it's all about consistent generation. I think the pilot would give you that X amount of kilowatts gets generated on average each day, which then would kind of give you where you thought it would go. And then as a partnership, if the size of the pilot was to remain, or was there an intention then, because of the potential return, did the group then want to have a conversation about something bigger or different? I think it is specifically at this point, as a pilot, the 22.3 is about buying in. But I don't believe at this point in time there's a specific number, because I think they want to really see what they're going to get for average daily kilowatt generation in order to be able to do that return on investment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maxwell, you have the floor.
Thank you. So the 22.3 buys us into an application to FCM. Could we lose that? Could they say no? So is this a little bit of a gamble? Like, so we could put our 22.3 in, and the group could get turned down by FCM? Can that happen, or are we guaranteed that we're going to?
Well, without the money from FCM, the project doesn't go ahead, so there's nothing to be spent. So basically, the way that I understand it is that the partners basically make a guarantee of 10% of the overall costs. That then goes to FCM. If FCM approves, then basically FCM puts the 90% in and the project moves ahead. I think the question you're asking is there a risk to losing the investment? I don't believe it was ever framed up that the partners' money was going to be spent first. That my understanding was that needed to be the guarantee in order to get the FCM investment, and without that, the project couldn't move ahead. But I certainly be happy to confirm that in that, framing it up that way in a conversation between now and when we would go to council.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, if FCM said, well, no, not this year, then, you know, we're not gonna approve your group this year, but maybe next year, then is it another 22.3 for the following year? Or does that stay in an account and we don't have to reinvest again?
Right. My expectation would be is that once you found out you were approved, so let's work off the assumption that if the application were to move forward this year, you would find out in this fiscal year, then you would be committing your $11,150 for this year, and then another $11,150 next year. I would expect, but I will confirm, that if the partners made a confirmation of the investment and FCM said, no, you're not being approved, then no monies would go from the partners at that point in time. But I will confirm that for you.
Okay, so personally, I'd like to have that answer before I voted on this. So is it possible to table this until we get an answer?
Certainly, if it's the will of council, we can. I will hear from the next three that are here, but once I hear from them, then if we wish to table it, we absolutely can. And it still could be brought back to council, or
Sure.
Could? Okay, thank you. All right. Councillor Huntley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. I did have a little bit of a similar concern to Councillor Maxwell's. Excuse me, sorry. What happens if FCM just says, nope, it's not going to go forward for whatever reason? Do we get our money back? And I just want to know where the guarantee is in our cash flow, for sure. And I really like this project. I'm really torn, but right now to have, you know, a little bit of money, I'm not saying little, but it is a lot, but it's money floating there that we just were unsure of right now. That's my only hindrance. I believe in Turbine. I think it's a great idea. That's my hindrance right now. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Councillor Huntley. And Councillor Zabian, you have the floor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You know what? I'm sure it's a great project. I'm just gonna put this out there, and you know, $23,000 is a lot of money. And I mean, there's so many things that we should be looking at in this town that we, for whatever reason, aren't. We've got broken sidewalks downtown. We've got people here that are homeless that we could help if we wanted to. And we're looking at something that's a risk. We don't know what we're gonna get out of it. I just think it's time that we sit here and start spending our money where we can see it, where we know it's gone. And this is a great idea, and you know, hopefully that it's a great project, but I think there's more we can do here with our dollars, and unfortunately, we're not. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor York.
Is it possible, especially if we were going to be sending it back for some further information, to get a projection of what an ROI might be? Or would there be similar projects in areas like ours where we could get at least a sense of what an ROI could be? Because if we could make back the 22.3 or more than that annually, then to Councillor Zabian's point, we could take that money and spend it wisely here as well, but generate it somewhere else instead of on the taxpayer back.
I'll be honest with you, I think there's been a number of conversations around, and it's, at this moment in time, the whole purpose of the pilot would be the potential output of the system. And I mean, there's obviously an expectation that electricity is going to be generated. I think the question becomes, you know, how much on a consistent basis. But I mean, I certainly am happy to see if there is anything we could get on that. My suspicion would be not likely though.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the project, who was it that did it? It was Berwick and Mahone Bay, and I don't recall the third, New Glasgow, right, the third partner. And I think there was a substantial cash outlay at that juncture, but knowing what that return on investment would be, it's really tough to know that. So granted, so. Okay, so I think what we've decided to do, if everybody is in agreement, that we will pull that motion back and rescind that motion by Gerard and York, and send that back to CAO to come back to council with at the end of this month. Is everybody amiable to that? Yes, okay, great. All right, we are at the section of our meeting, correspondence, and I will pass that over to CAO Troke.
Thank you. So in the package for council, we have a thank you from Kings County Community Food Council. From Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, there was an update with regards to the Kentville Ravine, and Director Bedingfield referenced some of that in her piece tonight. We had correspondence from Susan McDougall, who had concerns around reputation of the town and asked council to reflect on their role and the rules. I have from John Andrew, he had made some comments with regards to chickens and food security. I believe that was actually a bit of a follow-up from comments that might have been made in a previous meeting. Evan Pushy wrote that Evan Pushy was against the new chicken bylaw. Fiona Van Wilgenberg wrote that against the chicken bylaw. And I had Rebecca Mahaney had a number of questions with regards to certain aspects of the chicken bylaw and aspects of the animal control bylaw. And lastly, from John Andrew, who wrote and had some concerns around council's behavior. The full documents are in council's package.
Thank you, CAO. We will go, unless there's any questions, we'll go right into new business. And the first item of new business is the recommendations for grants to organizations. And CAO Troke, can you please provide council with the synopsis of?
Thank you. So each councillor had filled out a grid, supplied that information. So based on that information, what you see here is the request that was made by each organization, the average, and then what we called the most common amount. And the most common amount was when you had councillors that if the majority of councillors consistently said this was the amount in which they wanted support. And so ultimately that became the number that you see in the recommended award. So the result using the most common amount would be a total grants of $25,500. The total grants budget was $26,000, so $500 under budget. And that is the recommendation that we're bringing forward to council for for CAC to move forward to council.
Thank you, CAO. So the motion reads like this, that CAC recommend to council to approve the distribution of community grants as detailed in the attached report to the September 26, 2022 council meeting, and further, that the details of the distribution be publicly shared as per policy. Do I have somebody to motion that? Thank you. Councillor Zabian, second. Councillor Huntley? Discussion. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. This is an interesting way to handle the grants, but personally, I preferred the way that we always did it, which was we had a meeting, a grants meeting, and council sat down with all the applications, and we hashed it out ourselves. And if we needed to make changes, we made those changes. Personally, I prefer the decision to stay with council, and that we have a meeting and that we decide, if we need to raise somebody up or if we need to lower somebody down to make room for somebody else. I'm not for something like this. I'm for council meeting and discussing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. And I think, if I recall correctly, I think part of the reason why it was hard to get a meeting together, I think that was sort of the rationale around it, but agreed, yeah, it's nice for us to all get together and hash that out and look at all the different entities that are asking for the grants. So, any other discussion? No? Okay, so the question is that CAC recommend to council to approve the distribution of community grants as detailed in the attached report to the September 26, 2022 council meeting, and further, that the details of the distribution be publicly shared as per policy. And voting is opened. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried with one nay vote. Thank you. Next is the Investment Advisory Services, and CAO, I can take this if you wish, or did you want to take it? So the Investment Advisory Services, the Investment Advisory Committee has voted to extend the services of the investment advisor for 1 year. The committee has the option to tender the services each year. However, members have voted to retain TD Wealth Management until 2023. The chair of this committee, Deputy Mayor Kate Savage, requests that council approve an extension of services by TD Wealth Management for the Investment Advisory Committee until 2023. So the motion reads like that CAC recommend to council to approve a 1-year extension of the TD Investment Advisory Services. Could somebody motion that? Thank you. I'll sit Councillor Huntley, and seconded by Councillor Zabian. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? No discussion, then we'll go right to the question. The question is that CAC recommend to council to approve a 1-year extension of the TD Wealth Investment Advisory Services to the September 26, 2022 council meeting. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried unanimously. Okay, I think the next item is the PACE bylaw amendment. CAO, can you please provide an update to council?
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
So, at the June 27th, 2022 meeting of council, a motion was made to approve a joint application to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Community Efficiency Financing Program. And so this was Kentville and West Hants moving together with this application. Now, the town of Kentville already has an existing PACE bylaw, but it was from July of 2016. And based on a lot of the learnings from PACE Atlantic and through conversations with West Hants, is that we've made a couple of proposed changes here to the existing property assessed clean energy program, or the bylaw that exists with the town of Kentville. Some of these are including things like the reduction of water consumption. So our old bylaw, when it looked at energy, only looked at kind of the heating and cooling side of a house. It didn't look at things like water consumption. When it talked about an owner, we didn't actually define what it meant to be the owner of a real property. So we wanted to make sure when we use the term owner, what that meant. Also, when you talk about interest accrued, having interest charged against something, there's also the potential that in the event that there was a default, the ability to have interest charged, and the period of years that is consistently looked at as the maximum period of years that have been used for financing any of these has been 15 years. That doesn't mean that's where we end up with this program, but basically it just creates a consistent bylaw with regards to what is being used for all the different parties So these would be changes to the existing PACE bylaw that then would put us lockstep with any other groups. The program itself does not get defined by this bylaw. That's a separate piece that will come back to council. This is just about making sure the nuts and the bolts behind, or the back office of this, has the capacity based on the definitions that we would need.
Thank you, CAO. So the motion reads that CAC recommend first reading to council of the amended PACE bylaw to the September 26, 2022 council meeting. Can I have somebody move that? Oh, okay, Councillor York and Councillor Maxwell, can I use you as a second? Maxwell, so it's been moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion. So there is no discussion on the motion. So the question is that CAC recommend first reading to council of the amended PACE bylaw to the September 26th, 2022 council meeting. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so these are the additions to the agenda, folks. So we'll go to item D under new business, and that was a maintenance issue. And Councillor Maxwell, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm sure that my council colleagues will recall, and CAO will recall me sending out a barrage of pictures over the summer of sidewalk concerns, various sidewalk concerns. And these aren't little, these are like big chunks of pavement that somebody could catch their toe in or catch their foot in or whatever. Buildings that we own that are not being maintained properly, so they need a coat of paint, they need some caulking around windows, and these things. I would call these things ongoing maintenance issues. And it looks like they've been ongoing for quite a while, not just the last 2 years. This is ongoing for quite a long time. And a lot of the ones that I sent you pictures of, especially the sidewalks, those were some of the worst ones that I saw, and they were ones that I felt would be liability concerns, that a person could trip, slip and fall, break a bone, come back on come back on the town for a liability claim. They were quite serious ones. And I understand that we want to wait for grants to replace large sections of sidewalk, but by ongoing maintenance, I mean patch it up. No, put some asphalt in that hole so people don't trip. And so this is what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at waiting for grants to come to through the active transportation plan to patch, to take out a sidewalk and put a whole new sidewalk in. I'm looking at, why haven't we been patching? Why haven't we been maintaining our assets to the level that they should be maintained? The Lions Club building from Station Lane is an eyesore. It needs a coat of paint. The rink is peeling in the front. It needs some touch up with the paint. And I don't like to see our assets not being maintained, because eventually the cost of fixing or maintaining goes way up. So I think we need to find out why these maintenance issues are not being addressed promptly, because this is not, like I said, it's years of neglect. CAO, I'm looking for some help with this. are we not, is nobody responsible to go around town, take a walk around town, see what needs to be done, and then, putting it in, submitting it to the various departments and saying, these are issues that need to be addressed this summer, for example. One that's really, really concerning to me right now is the area in front of Headliner Studio. And I showed you all pictures of that, and I told you what happened, but I'll tell the public. I took my mom, we needed to get her hair done, and because Granville Manor doesn't have a stylist, or didn't at the time, and I needed to get her hair done, so I contacted Kings Point to Point, which is a fantastic service. And municipalities pay into that. It's a wonderful service. And they came and picked her up and brought her and parked her in front of Headliner Studio, and then used the lift, because she's in a wheelchair, to lower her down so that we could get her into the shop. And there's no disability parking in front of there. And so the spot that we were in went up into a driveway. I think both of them do. And this one in particular, it looked like a bomb had hit the pavement, and you had one stepping stone, then several inches after that you had another one, and then you had another one. And I was going to take her and bring her up onto the sidewalk, and the guy said, no, let me do that. And thank goodness he did, because you had to maneuver the wheelchair so that the wheels hit those stepping stones, or else the wheelchair would have tipped over. And that's a huge liability. That shop is the only shop in town that has a lower sidewalk, or a lower sink, so that people with disabilities can go to a salon and get their hair done, and their hair washed. And so once we get up on the sidewalk, then there were these great big lines that looked like an earthquake had come along. And again, you had to maneuver around those lines to get into the shop. This is a business owner in town of Kentville. I mean, that's existed like that for a long time. That didn't just happen this summer. So do we have somebody that goes around and looks for that? If not, can we have somebody go around and look for that? Do we have to wait for grants? Can we not do patching? Those are my questions.
CEO Troke?
Thank you for your comments, and as always, please, if there's ever any issues that you do come across, please don't ever hesitate to forward them. The patching on sidewalks, we do it, and then typically it lasts basically to the winter, because then the sidewalk plow, we usually take the asphalt that you put down to try and fill a hole, we usually take it out. It's just kind of one of those pieces. So usually with regards to sidewalks, there is early in the season a look at those places where kind of a spreader patch would go in and fill those. But then to your comment with regards to some of those big areas, they are very much part of that plan with regards to next summer, when the intention is much of the infrastructure and sidewalks in downtown will be affected then by part 2 of the active transportation plan. Usually what happens when we issue our contract with regards to asphalt and concrete, you try to target the biggest and the worst potholes, and whether it's in the streets or on the sidewalks first. And generally what you do is you look at places like your main entrances into town, and then you work your way from there. One of the challenges is that the folks who would do this work are being dragged by every town to do that work. So they'll come to Kentville for 2 days, you hit as many as you can, and then they get moved along. Certainly I'm happy to continue working with our team to try and identify some of those bigger pieces that they get done earlier in the season than they are. It does kind of become a competing interest between patching the hole in the road versus patching the hole in the sidewalk. But certainly I'm happy to work with the team and see if there's something we can be more efficient with that. That said, most of the sidewalks with regards to an overall refresh in the downtown are really part of that active transportation plan for next year.
Thank you. I understand that, and I am a little bit frustrated. I honestly haven't seen much new patching done in quite a few years. And in front of Open Arms, looks like we took out a section of cement there to do something to a light pole. So you've got one piece of cement for people to walk by Open Arms on. Part of that is taken up with a bench. I walked by there and my foot went into that hole, and I rolled my ankle going across the front of there. That hole has been there for a couple of years, I would say. It's been there for a long time. Why we would fix the pole and not fill the hole, to me, it makes no sense. And I don't know what other councillors think, but I think that this is ongoing stuff that we need to look after our citizens as they're walking about our town, visiting our shops, spending money in the businesses, and we need to look after them and not wait until an accident happened. And maybe that's the political thing. You wait till somebody gets hurt and you pay out the liability. It's cheaper than looking after the patch. I don't know. But I think this is a moral issue, and we need to pay attention to our ongoing maintenance. And I would like to see something done about that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Zabian, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm just going to speak about Webster Street because nobody's on Webster more than I am. I've never seen anybody patch any holes there in the 10 years I've been there. And I mean, as you go up the street, there are holes where, I don't know how long that brick system's been there, 25 years now. There are holes literally there where I've seen people fall into. And I've mentioned it here before, and I'm by no means am I blaming the staff, because if they don't have direction to do it, they're not going to do it. I mean, those are things that should be fixed. I don't want to see people fall and get hurt, and nobody's going to like this comment, but we just heard it an hour and a half ago. If you can spend $46,000 in a lawsuit, you can fix some sidewalks. Common sense has to prevail at some point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gerard, you have
Thank
the
you,
floor.
Deputy Mayor. I agree with both of the two councillors that spoke. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we're entertaining spending $1 million on a bike lane, active transportation, but let's face it, it's a bike lane, for a handful of people to drive directly through our downtown core. And let's not kid ourselves. If we give them a direct route through town without having to stop, they won't stop. So it's not an economic sale. But we've got a downtown core right from the ballparks in spots all the way down past the Need store, where there's a certain portion of our population that can't access it because they can't get to it with whatever type of vehicle or wheelchair that they have, or people that use walkers and stuff like that. And I think before we spend a red cent on a bike lane, everything in the downtown core should be fixed so it's accessible to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor York.
Thank you. I agree with everybody, or what has been said so far, and I think two things can exist at the same time. I think we can need a bike lane and an active transportation route, and we can also fix sidewalks that we have currently. I don't think one negates the other. I think they're both important, and they should both be put to the top of a list. I will respectfully disagree that an active transportation route will take people directly out of town. I do think they will stop, Councillor Gerard. But I do think it's important that we also maintain and fix the sidewalks so that people, when they do stop while visiting through the active transportation route, have a safe and easy way to walk around town, as well as the citizens who live here and fund it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry, Councillor Maxwell, I did.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor York in regard to comments made on the active transportation lane. I don't believe in robbing Peter to pay Paul. The active transportation lane is a vital part of accessibility in Nova Scotia, in Kentville in particular, and it is very important for our youth to be able to transport themselves through town safely, from one end of town to the other end of town, to access recreation services and things like that. People will stop if they're riding their bikes. I see them all the time in Berwick, come up the trail and stop and go into the restaurants and go into the cafes and things like that. So, I mean, yes, we can drive that business away if we want to, but I don't think that council is looking to do that. I think that we have a healthy financial situation in the town of Kentville. And I'm just saying, over the years, and I'm not saying this council or, this could go back a ways, this ongoing maintenance has not been given any attention. And so I would like us to direct the CAO to look at, ask staff why that has happened and find a solution. So I could make that a motion if you'd like.
I'll make a comment, if I could. I think it might behoove Councillor Bell, Director Bell, maybe to cover off in one of his reports which sidewalks that are going to be replaced that we're getting the 90-cent dollars on. That might be interesting for everybody and the community to know. I know we've covered it off before, but just having that upgrade and update might help. And I know, we certainly did one of the largest capital budgets this year that we had done in quite a number of years. It was $5 million, so it was quite large. But maybe CAO Troke, you could also speak at another meeting about the asset management plan and how the structures, to Councillor Maxwell's point about the upkeeping of the structures and the upkeeping of the sidewalks, how that's incorporated into that asset management plan, because my understanding is that the asset management plan is quite robust and very much up to date. So that was my only comment. Is that okay with you, Councillor Maxwell, or did you still want to make a motion on something with respect to this? Sorry.
I'm just thinking that if we need to direct the CAO, that, maybe I should make a motion to direct the CAO to discuss with staff ongoing maintenance around the town.
Sorry, Councillor Maxwell, I didn't have your mic on.
Oh, okay. I was thinking that if we're going to give the CAO direction, we should probably have a motion to direct the CAO to discuss with staff ongoing maintenance issues around the town and look at ways to address those issues and get back to us on a plan. Because, like I said, this isn't just happening now. This has been ongoing for a long time, and there must be a reason why this hasn't been done, and I would like to get to the reason why it hasn't been done.
So how did you want your motion to?
Council direct the CAO to discuss with staff ongoing maintenance issues around the town and come up with a plan to address those issues.
And for clarification, does that need to be recommended to come to council, or can it still be a motion from CAC? It can still be a motion from CAC. Okay, do I have a seconder? Councillor Zabian? Any further discussion while Jennifer's getting that ready? Councillor Gerard?
I'd like to see something added to it to tell us where the money's coming from.
Pardon?
Oh, I can answer that question.
Oh, okay, just one moment. Did you want to clarify what you're asking?
Well, these are in addition to active transportation and
No.
fixing up a few things, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
According to our finance director, all departments have a general maintenance line in their budgets.
True, but most of those general maintenance lines already have commitments against them, so this is an addition. There will be a cost associated with an addition, so I certainly can bring back if that's the case, yeah.
Okay,
But to your point, sorry, if I could.
sure,
So
absolutely.
to the council's point, if those maintenance budgets are spoken for and there's additional investments needed, certainly it would bring that back and with a recommendation on where that would come from or what that cost would be.
And what would be canceled out? because obviously we've set a budget and the budget is complete and spent. So with it would have to come from somewhere. Something wouldn't get done because of it.
So if I
Yeah, please, go ahead.
If I could, so where we're calling this a plan, certainly I will, without changing the motion so that Jennifer can get the motion out there, I would treat a plan as both operational and financial. Okay.
Great. Exactly what I just wrote down. Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer. So the motion is that Council Advisory Committee recommend to the September 26, 2022 meeting of council. The council direct the CAO to discuss with staff ongoing maintenance issues around the town and come up with an operational and financial plan to address those issues. Yes, correct. Thank you. Voting is opened. Voting is closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you. Great discussion. Letter E, the next item on the agenda is the public statement, and Councillor Zabian, you brought that forward, so you have the floor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So just to recap, about a month and a half ago, and this is public, we were threatened with a lawsuit from a former employee of the town of Kentville for some comments that Mayor Snow had made back in February 28th during a speech. And to avoid, or to, I guess, get us away from being involved in a lawsuit, hopefully, we came up with a public statement, which we called public statement. And I'm not sure if there was confusion that evening. I left, assuming that the direction was to post it. Our solicitor even heeded that same advice to put it on our social media platforms. As of now, we're almost 2 months since, I think that was July 25th, it hasn't shown up. So I would like to move that public statement is officially posted tomorrow, say by noon, on all of Kentville's social media platforms, as we called it the public statement, but for whatever reason, it's not public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zabian. And perhaps CAO, you would like to speak to that in terms of your understanding.
As I've already in an email to council, the minute that came out and the direction, I followed the minute that came out. And I recognize there was an extensive conversation that happened in camera, but the minute that came out of our session that night was followed to the T. If council wishes to do something subsequent to that, absolutely, obviously that's what's in council's purview, but coming out that night, the direction in the minute was followed.
Okay, so we have some discussion. I don't think there's not a motion at this juncture to do anything, so we'll just go right to discussion. Councillor Zabian, I still have you up. Are you next?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know what happened that evening. I left with a different understanding, but regardless, we're 2 months after almost. So my thoughts and my motion would be to have it published as soon as possible tomorrow, say by noon. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Councillor Maxwell?
Thank you. I've also been wondering about this issue. That evening, we had extensive conversation in camera. I do not recall any vote taken on when we were going to make this statement public. We did vote on the statement and if we all accepted it. I don't know who was taking the minutes. I don't believe our recording secretary was in that in-camera meeting, which is a problem, which should not happen. Our recording secretary should be in every in-camera meeting. And if she can't be, and even if she is, perhaps it should be videoed as well. So I can't swear that we said when it was going to come out. But I feel that we have missed the opportunity to be transparent with our public. And Facebook beat us to it. And I don't like that. Whether we do it now or whether we wait for a couple more weeks, to me, makes no difference whatsoever. We've already lost our reputation as far as transparency goes. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anybody else wish to speak? I know you have your light on. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's okay. Just remind folks, we're at CAC tonight, we're not at council. So we have council, we have minutes that will be approved at the next council, and that we are at CAC tonight. So this is committee making a decision. This is not council making a decision.
Would be a recommendation to council.
Correct.
Okay. Councillor York?
Yeah, with respect to the recommendation that it be on social media, my understanding, having been one of the founding members of the communication team, was that the Town of Kentville social media pages were somewhat neutral in terms of what was done at a government level. The social media channels are not meant to, or rather are meant to be engaging with citizens, but are also an advertising tool, a tourism tool, and many other things. I don't know that that recommendation would fit into the town's existing communication policy as it is written. So we would have to take that into consideration and look at the town's specific communication policies as it relates to social media.
Okay. Councillor Zabian?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This was and could still be a potential liability for the town, which could cost a lot of money. So I'm unclear. Even the several emails that I sent most of you 7 weeks ago, and very few of you replied. In fact, I don't think any of you replied to me. Just for clarity on that night, nobody gave me their response of what happened. I guess we were going to take a poll, correct? I think you had mentioned let's take a poll. Nobody could remember what happened in those 2 days between Monday and, if I recall, you were on your road, you were driving to your cottage, and you said let's take a poll, see if nobody could recall what happened in 48 hours. This is the confusion I have and the frustration that I have. What is a public statement if it's not public? What is it then? We met in camera, something was drafted, we were more than advised by someone that we pay, our solicitor, to publish it. And in fact, I remember saying, get it up tomorrow or as soon as you can. And then I asked a few days later and was ignored, as usual. That's just the usual protocol in the emails. And we are still now 7 weeks later with no public statement. And now we don't want to put it on Facebook. Do we put it in the paper? Do we just hide it in the minutes at the end of the month? Where does that public statement go?
Councillor Zabian, it's not hidden in minutes. If something is part of the minutes, it's part of the minutes. And after that meeting, I did ask for clarification from all of council if the direction that was given to CAO Troke was the direction that they understood it to be. And the majority understood that that was the direction.
I never got an answer back. You never replied back to me. You said you were on the road. And then that was pretty much it. You said you remembered. If you go back to the emails, you said, I remember myself. I'm on the road right now. And I think that was like a Friday or Thursday. Never heard about it again. So I just left it alone. That's a real hit to transparency to the public. And I mean, not only that, it's not just the fact that it was to the public. I mean, that was a huge liability. And we just kind of shuffled it again under a carpet, hoping it goes away. And that's unfortunate.
Well, the response was given the next day. CAO Troke, did you want to speak?
All I can say is that, there is a minute. The minute was clear direction to the CAO. I followed that direction. That minute and the direction obviously is going to be part of what comes to council. That's the process we follow. And so council at that moment in time would then have an opportunity to review that. I do want to just touch on the recording secretary being in camera. In fact, the recording secretary has only recently been joining us in camera. That typically the minute coming out of in camera is typically recorded by the CAO. And so that is not it is a new process having the recording secretary in camera meetings. So it has only been a few meetings where that actually has occurred.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. And hence therein lies the problem. If the CAO took the minutes, then the CAO remembers what the CAO remembers. I think that we have to.
Councillor Maxwell, I really do have to caution you when saying
About
that.
what? What are you cautioning me about? I said it's the same as if I remember what I remember. CAO has said that he took the minutes. I'm saying there is the problem. That's why we need to have a recording secretary there.
But the majority of council agreed with the minute that he understood that he took direction from. That's what he was just saying. So that's why I caution.
Yeah, well, I don't. Right? I don't. And therein, again, lies the problem. And so, without me coming out and saying more insulting things, I just think, and there's no point really in belaboring the fact, we were not transparent. And putting it in the minutes at the end of September is not transparency. Very few people in town read our minutes. It's a great way to cover something up. Where do we advertise? We advertise, or how do we get to our public? On our website. And that's the discussion that we had about putting it on the website. Not on Facebook, not on Twitter, not on Instagram, on our website. Okay? So I don't see that we should pursue this any further because we can't do anything about it. It's done.
Thank you. Councillor Zabian. Sorry, Councillor York, I took you off, but go ahead, Councillor Zabian.
You can go, you want to go first?
No, that's okay. She
Okay.
was behind you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I guess back to my original thing, can we just get it posted? That's, rather than sit here and belabor what happened over the last 7 weeks, our solicitor's here, and I mean, I certainly wouldn't mind asking him again if it's an issue to post it. He's here, on our legal staff to tell us if there's any negative part of posting it or not.
Well, it was a decision of council. It's not a decision of the solicitor.
Well, yeah, but there's some confusion there because I have a different image of what transpired. So does Councillor Maxwell. Just stated the same. And regardless, as CAO said, it's the will of council. So if his interpretation was just to stop there, then I'm making a new motion now to have it posted. And I wouldn't mind if we could ask Solicitor Matart. I'm not asking
Thank you.
him to recall that evening, but he can tell us right now, is there any problem with posting it? And my mic is off, by the way. So, thank you.
No, continue on.
Just, yeah, I'd like to show transparency. That's what I recall from that evening, and we can ask the solicitor if there's any issue with posting it now. Thank you.
If it's fine, I'm going to stay with the chronological. I'll go with Councillor York, and then you go ahead. There you go.
The CAO has addressed some of my concerns, so
Okay.
I'm fine, thank you.
Just 1 second, Solicitor. Yes, your mic is on.
I think the question's really a process question, and the CAO, I think, attempted to address it earlier. The challenge that's faced here tonight is that you are not council. You are a committee of council. Council made a decision, whatever that decision was. That decision's going to be reflected in the minutes that get approved at the next meeting. They may or may not be approved as circulated. And thus, here tonight, this group isn't in a position to change a decision of council. And the debate is really about what was the decision of council, and the appropriate time for that debate is when those minutes are being approved at your next council meeting. So I don't see how you address this issue without agreement, essentially, right? I don't see how you address this issue before the council meeting.
Thank you. Is everybody in agreement then that this will be addressed at the council meeting when the minutes are reviewed?
Yes, so yeah.
Okay, perfect. Perfect, thank you. And the next item on the agenda is also you, Councillor Zabian, and it is the investigation, Mayor Snow breach of code of conduct. I'll let you go with that, and then I may have the CAO interject. Just give me 1 second, yes, sorry.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is another thing, kind of banking on the transparency issue. This investigation relates to the same speech of February 28th, where Mayor Snow actually sat in your chair, Deputy Mayor, and spoke for 3-4 minutes. And we've already established through our public statement that's not really public, that a lot of the comments were inaccurate. We as a council have adopted that statement, wherever it is. There's an investigation that's been ongoing that we as a council decided to undertake about this speech that Mayor Snow made. And for whatever reason, I don't recall, and I mean, some of you can chime in, that it was decided, and if it was, I'd like to see where, I don't have an answer to that either, where it was decided that this investigation would come back in camera. And for the public watching, in camera basically means we shut the door, nobody knows what goes on, nobody hears anything, and that's what it is. We're elected officials, so if we do anything wrong, if we're out of the way or we misstep, we're supposed to deal with it here. We're not personnel, it's not a land matter, it's not a legal matter. And I just want to make it clear, this investigation to me, because I know what the answer is going to be next, is not about so much about personnel or some of the comments she made. We're talking about what she did. That's what I want to deal with. I don't care what she said in reference to, there wasn't really any comments about staff per se. That's not what I'm looking to hear back from the investigator. I want to hear back and say, did she break anything or not? It's cut or dry. That's all I'm looking for, black or white. And then we as a council can move forward from that. So why that has to go in camera is beyond me. And where that decision was ever made that it had to be in camera, again, no recollection of it. We had a recording secretary that evening, so there should be something there. And I have to echo off Councillor Maxwell, if we're not gonna have a recording secretary, they should be videoed. I've talked to other units and they video their in-cameras, because when we leave these in-camera sessions, it's very frustrating a week later or 48 hours later to hear different spins on what people took from those meetings. For a year and a half, there was nobody recording the minutes here. I believe the mayor was, in fact, and that's a fact. And that's so wrong on so many levels.
Just, if you could just stay.
I'm on topic.
On the topic, yeah,
So
please.
that's a problem for me. We have to do better here. And I think this is a step forward. So I just am putting it out there. This investigation, whatever it comes of it, should be done in public. Again, we're not diving into the matters of Rice. That's not on the docket. What's on the docket is Mayor Snow's breaches. Thank you.
Councillor Huntley.
Thank you. Excuse me. I know tonight is CAC meeting. I'm just wondering, can this topic just go on to our council meeting in 2 weeks? Can we like table this for now? And it doesn't seem like it belongs in this meeting tonight.
Well, it was elected to be on the agenda.
I know.
So when it's on the agenda,
Yeah.
it comes before council, and then we discuss it, and if there are aspects of it that we wish to send to council or wish to have more information on, then we can do that by virtue of putting it on the agenda. I'm gonna turn it to CAO, because I think he may, and maybe solicitor, you may want to speak on this as well, I don't know.
Before I speak to this, I'm going to caution a few councillors just using the word spin. When we come out of in camera, there is a very specific minute is given.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we follow, and then you approve it. So I just am cautioning when we start talking about spin, it kind of puts a context that the work that's just been done somehow or another isn't legitimate. In camera is a very legitimate reason. There is legitimate reasons to go. I just caution. The second piece here is that with regards to direction was given, and the direction was that this investigation was going to come back to council in camera. The night in which the discussion occurred, We got an outline from the solicitor and the rationale. And the rationale was bigger than just what the concern was under the code of conduct, that in order for the investigator, in order for the folks involved in this to be able to look at the complete picture and then make a decision, we were going to be talking about things that had been handled, potentially even by a previous council, in camera. So there's a reason then you shape out the entire picture here in order to be able to make a decision. I 100% appreciate the councillor's comments around, he has very specific pieces that he has concerns around, and 100% he has a right to be concerned around that. I think in this situation, though, the way that this was scoped out was that there was a much bigger picture that needed to be absorbed, and that the investigator was going to need certain skills in order to be able to do that. So in camera, we selected an investigator, and then that investigator began that work with the assumption that they would come back and have this conversation in camera, and understand that that conversation in camera may be very robust. It may go all over the place, and so therefore it needs to be in camera, because previous legal considerations, previous personnel considerations are potentially going to be discussed as part of that. So while I recognize the issue at hand and the resolution of a specific issue, the scope that we discussed was much broader in that, and that's the reason. Once that comes to council and in camera, and if council makes a decision and wants to bring it out, that is council's purview. But in order to have that conversation unfettered, unworried about, are you saying something you shouldn't say? Do you now know something you shouldn't know? That needed to happen in camera. That was essentially the conversation that took us to where we are.
Thank you, CAO. Solicitor Matar, did you want to mention anything on that piece as the direction, part of the direction it come from you?
I just really want to compliment the CAO on summarizing it so well. I think what's important to the small snippet of that's important to take from it is what council does with it after, okay? Because that piece will be in public. It could turn out that the investigator's report comes back and there's nothing in it that we need to be concerned about. And perhaps council will make the whole report public. At this point, you simply don't know, so it's premature to talk about what you don't know.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Solicitor just clarified for me, but I think it is important that the result should come out in public, regardless of what that result is. So the discussion can happen in camera, but the result should come out in public.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zabian.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Solicitor. I sit here and I don't have a lot of faith sitting in this room sometimes. So how do we know that that report, and I respect what the solicitor said, where's the assurance that that report is going to be public? Because I can, things happen and we forget conversations and months go by. And so where's the assurance? Do we need a motion that says that that report is going to be made public? Because like I said, I leave here thinking one thing, and then a couple of days pass or a month passes and we're back to square one, and either people don't recall or they've got a different interpretation of a decision. Thank you.
Solicitor?
So we need to be clear. There is none. The report itself may never become public. Council's going to make a decision coming out of that report, and it's council's decision that, standing here, I presume, will be public. And I have to say, I'm also assuming council's going to make a decision. Council might not make a decision, but assuming council makes a decision, that decision will be public. But the report may never be public because its contents may be such that it can't be.
Thank you. Councillor York.
I was just going to say that we just discussed why the report might not be able to be public, and it would be because the content might not be appropriate for it to be public.
Okay. Councillor Zabian.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I take those comments to mean that if it's something that's gonna defame the mayor, then probably it won't be public. But if it damns somebody else, then it probably would be public, so, anyway, thank you.
Perhaps, Your Worship?
I'm sorry.
You are Your Worship this evening.
I guess I'm
It wasn't, it's not clear to me whether Councillor Zabian was responding to my comments or to somebody else's comments. So I want to make it clear that, that those comments he just made would be very offensive if they were directed towards my comments. And others may feel the same way. So, but if they were directed towards my comments, they're very much out of line. Okay.
Councillor York, I still have you up. Are you?
Yes, thank you.
You go ahead. Thank
Through the
you.
chair, if I might.
Yes.
I resent the implication of Councillor Zabian that I will speak for myself, would make a decision based on protecting somebody's feelings, whether they did something right or wrong. I make a decision with the information that is at hand, and I make a decision that's best for this town. I do resent the implication that I would try and cover something up per whatever feelings the councillor may have.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Zabian, did you wish to?
No, I just made that comment because you rolled your eyes there a second ago. So you kind of, when you roll your eyes and talk about somebody, then you're going to get a comment back, Councillor York.
Okay.
You didn't like my question, so you retaliated with an expression there, and if you want to go back and watch it. So, and it wasn't directed at you, solicitor, at all. So you can't make those comments and those looks and expect not to get a response. So anyway, it's fine. We'll see what comes of it, and we'll move forward from it. Thank you.
Councillor York, did you wish to say anything else?
No, I don't want to prolong this.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's, that ends our new business, and we are in the public comments section. And the members of the public are invited to speak to council on a matter that is currently before council. Please provide your name and your address, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. Is there anybody that would like to speak to council this evening? I think yes? Okay. Yes, put that back on. Yes, thank you.
Oh, good.
Yes, you're good. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Fiona of 47 Wade Street. I'd like to just start off by saying that council meeting attendance could be improved by placing a few signs at the doors and the stairwell. I know the first time that I came in, I didn't know where I was going, so anyways. During a recent council meeting, I think it was either May or June's, a citizen was asked to leave after speaking out of turn. I'm sure he broke some rule by interrupting, and so he was swiftly removed so the meeting could continue. Unfortunately, about a month later at the July 25th meeting, I was quite rudely accosted during my 3 minutes at the end of the meeting. This councillor had already dominated most of the meeting and must have decided she needed my 3 minutes as well. I won't say names in order to avoid being interrupted again, but I will pose a question. If citizens can be made to leave for poor behavior, should this also apply to councillors? And if it's mandatory that they stay, maybe their mic could be muted, or they could even be asked to stand in the corner. In all honesty, I'm not upset about it. I had a good laugh afterward, but I think behavior like this will only discourage residents from speaking on issues that they find are important. I also think this type of behavior is just the tip of the iceberg, and it probably leaches into all other aspects of the job. Suing, counter-suing, threatening lawsuits, screaming matches, name-calling, volatile social media posts, and wild unfounded accusations, to name a few, do not make for a strong council. Sounds more like a Keeping Up with the Kardashians episode. If these rifts cannot be fixed and a proper level of professionalism cannot be achieved, then maybe the town should look into calling an early election as opposed to asking individuals to step down. Kentville needs an effective leadership team, and currently, most important issues have been tossed to the wayside to make room for more foolish infighting. To council and residents, it's best not to engage in defamatory social media posts. It only adds fuel to the fire. And maybe we could stop using Frank Magazine as a trusted source of objective journalism when standing up on the soapbox. A gossip magazine probably isn't the best barometer of truth. What is the point of paying property taxes in full when only rudimentary town services are being performed? I'm perfectly happy to pay for what gets done, but it seems a waste to pay the wages of councillors who aren't accomplishing much of anything. You're paid to represent and make decisions on behalf of the residents, so start doing that instead of representing your own selfish interests. I truly think you all have the potential to be good councillors. Most of you already are. So everyone, please leave your antics at the door and bring a rational and respectful voice to the table. And lastly, if that can't happen, at least let us chicken owners keep our chickens in peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for speaking. Yes, please come.
Hi, my name's Angela Ripley. I've been a resident of the town of Kemptville for 40 years. I've never spoken in this council before. I do need to speak on the backyard chicken issue. So the avian industry is a very large industry in this area. And earlier this year, there was the avian flu. And as we know, farms were quarantined because it can spread really, really quickly. So the commercial farms have a veterinarian that looks after their chickens all the time. Backyard chickens, they do not. There is a shortage of veterinarians, so there's not. The other thing I want to speak to is leptospirosis. So that is a bacteria that a rat can pass on to chickens. Chickens pass it on to our dogs. Our dogs pass it to us. It affects the kidneys. So that's, and rats are more prone in chicken farms. Ask any chicken farmer. The roosters. I really don't think the town is a place for roosters. There's one in our neighborhood. It crows every 8 seconds. Now, for anybody who's healthy, feeling well, works a regular 8 to 4 job, might not be an issue. But for someone who works for shift work, that could be. I'm sure if a dog made noise that often, there would be complaints made. I do have information on leptospirosis if anybody wanted to look at that. It comes from Veterinary Partner, which is a vet service site. As a taxpayer, I don't know that everybody in the town knows that there's chickens in the town. I didn't know until I started hearing a rooster. So maybe that's something you could put on your website to inform people. Because when you say you haven't received complaints, I'm not sure that everybody knows. And if everybody knew, they might be not as comfortable with chickens in town. What if I wanted to have a pig? What then? Is that going to be allowed? A goat? To mow my lawn? Like, it just is opening doors. Yeah. Chickens bring rats. Rats aren't healthy for our population in town. And the other thing is, if we're going to live in a country setting, I would prefer to pay county taxes. I thank you for my time.
Thank you very much. Okay, seeing nobody else coming up, I'm going to suggest